Welcome to another exciting meeting of the Housing and Homelessness Committee, today in a new location, room 401. I'm joined today, right now, by my colleagues, council members Padilla and Blumenfield. Mr. Lopez, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Rahman.
Here.
Councilmember Blumenfield.
Present.
Councilmember Padilla.
Present.
Councilmember De Leon, absent. Councilmember Rodriguez, absent. 3 members and a quorum, Madam Chair.
Great. So we have 9 items to consider, and this is a special agenda. Item 1 is a verbal update from the CAO and LAHD about streamlining contracting and invoicing processes for homeless service providers in order to resolve payment issues which have bedeviled the city and caused numerous issues for our service providers making payroll. Item 2 are CAO, CLA, and LAHSA reports about the interim housing bed rates adjustment, which is talking about increasing costs that we pay per night on our beds to match what service providers are telling us is the cost that they're facing. Item 3 is a verbal update from LAHSA on corrective action taken regarding time-limited subsidies. Item 4 is a verbal update from the CAO on progress on master leasing, which is part of our strategy to meet our our housing goals in the city. Item 5 is a verbal update from the mayor's office about transitioning inside safe beds to Alliance eligible beds. Item 6 is a CAO report relative to the homeless emergency account, which is the 20th status report, and that's dated September 30th, 2024. Item 7 is a motion about completing a feasibility study for the property at 5301 Sierra Vista Avenue in Council District 13 for a tiny home village. Item 8 is a motion instructing the LAHD with the assistance of the city attorney to report with recommendations to amend the just cause eviction ordinance by removing the substantial remodel clause. And item 9 is a CAO report relative to SB2, the permanent local housing allocation, and how we're spending that as a city. So that's a lot of items. We're not going to hear all of them. Some of them will be moving forward on consent, but it is a substantive agenda. But right now we're going to move to public comment. Comments will only be on the items listed in the agenda because this is a special meeting. I was assured that there is going to be an interpreter available for commenters. Can we confirm? Hello, thank you. And we have our city attorney here to give us instructions for public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the members of the public, when it is your turn to speak, please state the name you signed up under and which of the agenda items you would like to speak on. You have 1 minute per item for a maximum speaking time of up to 2 minutes. We will inform you when your time is up. When speaking on the agenda items, you must be on topic. Our goal is to get through as many speakers as we can. If you are not speaking on topic, or if we cannot tell whether you are on topic, you'll get 1 brief warning from me or the committee chair. If you do not immediately get clearly on topic, or if you stray off topic, you will forfeit the rest of your time, and we will move on to the next speaker.
I think I have all the speakers. Okay. Right now we only have 9 speakers on the queue. All right. Oh no, here we go. Just updated, and now we have 17. Okay. So I'll call a few names, and if you want to make your way up to the podium, Alana Holtz, Guillermo Mata, Shane Henson, Wenny Tranquilino. I'll call 2 more, Cindy Vigil and Erica Hernandez. If you want to make your way over to the podium. And today we'll take up to an hour of public comment, so we'll go till, what time is it right now? Okay, so we'll go for 1 hour starting now, and we'll stop public comment there. Go ahead, sir, your name and the items you're speaking on. Welcome, sir. Su nombre? Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Guillermo Mata.
And what items are you speaking on?
¿Qué temas está hablando? ¿De qué temas quiere hablar? Item number 8.
Okay, great. You have 1 minute.
Tiene un minuto. My name is Guillermo. I am 63 years old, and I've lived in Echo Park since 1989.
Sir, sorry. Can you pause the time? Hold on 1 second. If you can pause when you're speaking. Hold on, sir.
Señor, si puede pausar un momentito.
Hold on 1 second, sir.
Señor.
Mr. Mata. Mr. Mata. Okay, Mr. Mata, hold on for 1 second. Can you translate my instructions?
Señor. Si puede usted, me mira, acá estoy, señor. Míreme.
Allá.
Acá. Si puede usted nada más hablar, yo sé que me dio esto un escrito, pero ella quiere que hable nada más ciertas frases y deme momento para interpretar para que los dos no estemos hablando al mismo tiempo. ¿Sí?
Okay, let's start his time again.
Ahora vamos a comenzar su tiempo de nuevo.
Okay, go ahead, sir. Thank you so much.
Pásele, señor. Gracias. Good afternoon. I'm speaking on item number 8 of the agenda. My name is Guillermo. I'm 63 years old. And I've lived in Echo Park since 1989. First with my wife, then with our children, and now with my grandchildren. We are being evicted after a new corporate owner bought our building. It's been incredibly stressful because there's nowhere to move. Before the pandemic, I worked as a picture framer for 18 years. When COVID hit, I lost my job, developed health problems, and had to retire earlier than I planned. I cannot afford to move. Echo Park is our community, and we want to stay. Despite winning 2 eviction cases, the landlord issued another notice last month. It expires on November 26th. Please pass this law urgently to stop substantial remodel evictions.
Thank you, sir. Your time is up. Next
Gracias,
speaker.
señor. Su tiempo se acabó.
Gracias. Your name and the items you're speaking on? Oh, sorry, you need the agenda 8. Okay, go ahead. The mic is not working there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I am Winnie, a tenant of 1512 Mohawk Street and member of 1512 Mohawk Tenants Union. I am here to urge you to end eviction for substantial remodels and adopt an urgency ordinance to stop the surge of this eviction now. We are some of affordable units in Echo Park. Getting the first unlawful detainer and the threat of eviction was so scary. And then we are on the third eviction right now. And if we're evicted, it's impossible to find a new place that's affordable close to my work. We've lived together in this building for decades. We are a tight community. We look out and take care for each other. We haven't done anything wrong. We've been tenants in good standing for 21 years, always paying our rent on time. Please, council members, we ask you to close this loophole and please do it urgently. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm just confirming, speaker, your name is Winnie?
Winnie.
Thank you so much. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on?
Name Erica Hernandez, and I'm speaking on agenda item 8.
Okay, great. Go ahead. You have 1 minute.
My name is Erica Hernandez, and I'm here today to urge you to pass an urgency ordinance to protect my family from eviction. I was raised in Echo Park. My family has lived here since the 1980s. My family still lives in the same unit, my brother, my sister, my uncle, and my niece. In November of 2022, everything changed for us when a new landlord took over. He came in with aggressive buyout offers, illegal eviction notices, and a whole set of new rules. Then in May of 2023, the eviction notices started arriving, claiming they needed to remodel. The impact in my family has been overwhelming. There's frustration, sadness, and confusion, emotions that take a real toll in their health. On top of the stress, my mom was diagnosed with non-genetic breast cancer just months into fighting these evictions. Imagine having to endure surgery and radiation therapy while fighting to keep your home. If my family is evicted, they have nowhere to go. There are no affordable places in Echo Park. We need this to pass now.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next speaker, and I'll call a couple of other speakers. Alana Holt, Cindy Vigil, Laura Harwood, Marnie Dela Cruz, Modesti Alvidre, and Shane Henson. Go ahead, speaker. Your name and the items you're speaking on.
Hi, my name is Cindy Vigil. I'm speaking on item number 2, and I work for Hope the Mission.
Okay, you have 1 minute.
Okay, thank you, Council Member. Let's be clear, the proposed 69-bed rate is a slap in the face. LASA's own study shows that the real cost is $139 with 23 cents per bed, with a $77.52 funding gap, and yet we're offered crumbs that don't even cover half of that. Because of this, 1,268 beds are on the verge of being cut from our system. People will be left out in the cold while we're drowning in underfunded contracts. Frontline workers already barely making a living wage are being pushed to the edge, and it's not sustainable. We demand a real action now. The city must commit to $89 per bed in January, no new service requirements, and work towards covering the true cost of care. This is non-negotiable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker. Your name and the items you're speaking on.
Laura Harwood, and I'm speaking on item number 2.
Okay, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, council members, for hearing me out today. I'm going to cut to the chase. $69 a night is nowhere near enough to pay for these beds. LASA's own study shows that the true cost of the bed is $139.23 a night, leaving a massive funding gap for $77. Yes, we're being offered a fraction of that, and it's forcing us to close beds. 1,268 beds are on the chopping block. That's thousands of Angelinos left with nowhere to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker. Your name and the items you're speaking on.
My name is Marnie Dela Cruz, and I'm speaking on item number 2.
Okay, go ahead. You have 1 minute.
The $69 that are covered for the bed rates doesn't cover everything else that's inclusive in the shelter beds. It comes with meals, it comes with mental health access, it comes with everything else that we're offering individuals, and it just doesn't cover it. We're putting more people out on the street on top of the people that are currently still experiencing homelessness. We're asking for the minimum amount of what it truly costs to house an individual, to give them a chance to get back into society and to partake in meetings like this and possibly sit at one of these tables.
Thank you very much. Next speaker. Next speaker. I've called a number of names, right? Alana Holt, Shane Henson, Guillermo Modesti. I can't read your writing. I'm sorry. Okay, let me call some more speakers then. Dexter O'Connell, Audit LA, Emily Falapino, Casper Lucy, Lily Noah. If you want to come up. Great. Your name and the items you're speaking on? Welcome.
And I'm going to speak on 7 and 8. And
Okay.
I know what you're expecting me to be talking about, but I'm actually going to.
You have 2 minutes for the items. Go ahead.
On topic, okay? Because he likes that. Okay. And I'm going to ask you all to pay attention because, you know, this is the public. Listen to us, please. All right. Number 7. Here we go, because this is one of yours. Still asking Mr. Martinez to be the hero for my problems. But with this, I am for the tiny home village topology. I have seen their work. I know out in the valley, Hope Mission, I don't know if it's the same as you guys, but they're doing God's work, okay? And $69 a day doesn't, if that's the same one, or is that number 8? I'm getting confused. I'm going to be talking to both of them, okay? That's not enough. I mean, come on, like the Inside Safe program is what, 17,000 a month per person? So what's 69? What do you get for $69? You know, like you don't get much. So come on, Ms. Padilla, I'll be friends with you for this one moment because this is your thing. 1 minute. Remember, your other buddy, he apologized, by the way, but I digress. But they need more money, okay? They need the money. It's not fair. There's so many people unhoused, and winter is coming, okay? And it is getting to where they need this. Give them the money. And as far as this other kind of like being able to kick people out for renovations, that is horrible. That needs to end today because you know what? It's not like they're being kicked out because they're not paying their rent or anything. It's a loophole. I had a friend that was kicked out of her house because they bought the house and said they were going to, you know, that the family member wanted to live there. And it was a lie. It's a ruse. So you have to be able to dig out the ruses and stop it. And city attorney, I stayed on topic, right? I'm always on topic anyway, but I've given you all a break today, all right? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much,
And
Speaker.
Good luck, guys.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on.
Thank you. Hello, Dexter O'Connell with Safe Place for Youth. Speaking on number 8 and number 2, please.
Okay, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Very good. Thank you very much. Hello, council members. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Renoviction is illegal per the precedent in the Barrington Plaza case, which you're all familiar with. And yet it happens all the time, especially on the West Side. SPIES members, transition age youth, are often victims of this dastardly practice. We encourage you to pass item 8, but please amend to add an urgency clause, as the tenants who spoke earlier spoke so intentionally and importantly about. And we'd also ask you to enact an interim control ordinance to bring immediate relief to tenants and to ensure that this illegal practice is stopped in its tracks. On item number 2, the CAO is not a serious person. The idea that these poverty rates will in any way supply the services that keep people engaged in shelter is highly misguided. Fundamentally, we need rates that will keep people indoors and will help us provide a level of shelter quality that ensures that people will stay in their programming and transition effectively into permanent housing. The proposed rates do not offer anything resembling that and are fundamentally insufficient to successfully housing the unhoused population of Los Angeles. If the city would like to see beds closed, if the city would like to see frontline workers experiencing homelessness themselves, if the city would like to see increases in rates of rejecting shelter and effective paths to housing that come along with that, then you should continue with the CAO's preposterous proposal. If the city would like to see people continuing to get off the street, the progress that we've been making in the past continuing, then I strongly encourage you to pay SPI and other operators of transitional housing and shelter what it costs to operate these facilities and to pay it to us on time. Thank you.
Next speaker, please, your name and the items you're speaking on.
Sure, my name is Emily Filipino. I'll be speaking on item number 2.
Okay, you have 1 minute. Go ahead, speaker.
Thank you. Council members of the committee, thank you very much for giving us some time to comment. I work in human resources at Hope the Mission, and before I worked at Hope, I had never worked directly in homeless services before. As an individual, I knew that homelessness was a problem, and I knew that it was going to take quite an investment to fix it, but I was blissfully ignorant. Now that I work in this sector, I see the problem every day, and I see that the state of our homelessness crisis is a symptom. It's a symptom of decades of decisions that underestimate the crisis. It's decades of decisions that underestimate the funding decisions that need to be made to solve the problem. And it's decades of just splitting hairs of responsibility at the cost of real lives meeting the street and real lives dying on the street. We acknowledge that you recognize the crisis, and we're asking you not to perpetuate it like the decades of decision makers before you. The cost of care is factually known to be at least $139 per bed. Proposing a bed rate of $69 does not solve the problem, it only perpetuates it. It's basic math and an understood fact that $69 is unsustainable, and respectfully, we expect a fair bed rate of $89 with no additional requirements effective January.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Next speaker. Okay. Are these names not in here? Alana Holt, Shane Henson, Modesti Elvidre, Casper Lucy. Are any of you here? No. Okay. Let's call some other names. Lily Noah, Lourdes Mata, Lupita Corrales, Matt Nussbaum, Matthew Mata, Mina Garcia. Please make your way up to the podium. Stefano Medina, Rowan Vansleeve, and Ricardo. You're not. You're Sorry, speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on. We're having a little bit of technical issues here.
Yeah, that's fine. I signed up a bunch of those people. They're outside. Sorry.
And sorry to everyone who has other people that you're working with who are waiting outside. We are in a smaller room than usual. That was not our choosing. And so I apologize for that, but go ahead.
So my name is Stefano Medina. I'm an attorney in Los Angeles.
And what items are you speaking on?
I'm speaking on number 8.
Okay, you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
So I've represented about a dozen tenants in the past 9 months in substantial remodel evictions, and not in a single case has the landlord been proposing these remodels in good faith. And no, in every case that I have directly litigated, it has been because the tenant was a below market tenant. Removing substantial remodel as a cause for eviction is lawful under state law. The Tenant Protection Act explicitly allows local governments to pass eviction protections that are more protective of tenants than state law. Rental units where rent increases are regulated by the Tenant Protection Act will continue to have the same legal limits apply since tenancies will no longer be terminated due to renovations. This is the same approach that a number of California cities have taken to ensure that renovations are not a pretext to evict long-term tenants and increase rents over the amount otherwise allowed by law. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next speaker. Your name and the items you're speaking on.
Good afternoon. My name is Mina Garcia, and I'm here to speak on line item number 2.
Okay, you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I am here to address a critical issue facing the City of LA, interim housing beds rates for people experiencing homelessness. The current rates are simply unrealistic. At the rates we are being compensated, it's nearly impossible to provide the necessary services, care, and support that our most vulnerable people need. While the public is demanding real improvements on our streets without adequate funding, we are being asked to do more with less. This approach is unsustainable. To truly address homelessness, we must be realistic about the cost involved in providing safe, dignified housing and services. Our organizations are stretched thin, and without an increase in these rates, we are at risk of not meeting even the basic needs, let alone making any progress. We urge you to improve the increases in the rates, not later on, not July, now. This is not just a matter of funding, but of ensuring that we can deliver the quality of care for our people. All eyes are on LA.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And if I could just make a gentle request to participants, we're excited that you're here. We feel your enthusiasm, but we generally don't permit clapping and hooting during these meetings. So if you could just honor that. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on.
Oh, sorry, you turned this on already. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Tardes. Mi nombre es Lourdes Mata.
My name is Lourdes Mata.
And what item are you speaking on?
¿Sobre qué tema va a hablar, señora?
Sobre el punto número 8 de la agenda.
Perfect. You have 1 minute.
Agenda number 8.
Tengo 59 años. Soy inquilina en Eco Park y estoy aquí para pedirles detengan los desalojos por remodelaciones mayores y adopten.
Sorry, I'm 59 years old. I'm a renter and I live in Echo Park. I urge you to stop the major remodeling evictions and adopt an emergency ordinance to stop these evictions now.
Y adopten una ordenanza de emergencia para frenar estos desalojos ahora. He vivido aquí durante 35 años, tengo hijos, nietos que crecieron en esta comunidad.
I have lived here for 35 years and I have children and grandchildren who have grown up here.
Que lo es todo para mí. He estado en este apartamento por más de la mitad de mi vida. Estoy recuperándome de un tratamiento contra el cáncer.
This community is everything to me. I have been in this apartment for more than half my life. I am recovering from cancer treatment.
Hemos estado luchando contra este desalojo durante años y hemos ganado 2 veces, pero el mes pasado recibimos otro aviso de 60 días.
We have been fighting this eviction for years. We have won twice, but received another 60-day notice last month.
Todos nos conocemos y hemos construido una comunidad donde estamos. Les pido que cierren la laguna legal de las renovaciones porque mi vida está aquí. Esta es mi casa y no quiero empezar de nuevo. Gracias.
We all know each other and have built a community where we are. I ask that they close the renovation loophole because my life is here. This is my home and I do not want to start over.
Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on.
My name is Matthew Mata, and I'm speaking on item number 8.
Tell me your name one more time.
Matthew Mata.
Matthew, thank you. Go ahead.
I'm a sophomore at downtown Magnus High School, just 7 minutes from where I live now in Echo Park. But my family and I are facing an eviction because our landlord says they want to remodel the kitchen and bathroom. I lived in this home my whole life. It's not just an apartment to me. It's where I grew up. The Mohawk apartment complex is a community spot where all kids I grew up with come to hang out. If we get evicted, we'll have to move far away and I'll have to leave my high school behind. That scares me. I don't want to start over at a new school where I don't know anyone. I shouldn't have to leave the place I love just because of a remodel. Please let my family stay in our home. We've built our life here, and this is where I belong.
Thank you, Speaker. I appreciate the shaking. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on.
My name's Rowan Van Sleeve, and I'm speaking on item 2. And first off, I want to thank each and every one of you, my councilwoman, Melda, Councilmember Bloomingfield, Mithiera. I'm so thankful for the 3 of you and the work that the City of Los Angeles is doing. When I got to choose this city as my home, our city really wasn't doing anything to address homelessness. And under your leadership, we have started that process to bring people inside. But this is a core service of our city, and we're underfunding it. And I ask a simple question. Were there similar sort of sessions to go through what other vendors to the city are being paid? Are their budgets scrutinized in the same way? Because at $69, it is completely inadequate. And let's pick just one line item, just one, the meal cost. You're asking me to feed over 2,000 people at $3.60 a meal. I can't do it. So every single day I go into debt. We're $20 million behind because the system that is designed to care for those of us who are most at risk is failing them. We need to do better.
Thank you, Mr. Van Sleeve. Next speaker, and I'll call all of the rest of my remaining names one more time. Alana Holt, Brenda Castro, Carmina Rodriguez, Chantel Lopez. I think Cindy Vigil already spoke. Is that right? Yes. Darren Harwood, Caspar Lucy, Kim Carter, Lily Noah, Lupita Corrales, Marissa Polvino, Matt Nussbaum, Michael Tanner, Modesti also spoke. Did Modesti speak? No. Ricardo, Shane Henson. Okay, go ahead. Your name and the items you're speaking on.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Ricardo Salazar. I work for Hope the Mission. I am the Director of Housing Services, and I oversee our navigation programs and our TLS program. But I'm here to talk on item number 2.
Okay, you have 1 minute.
So thank you, council members, for your efforts and attention on this critical issue. We recognize the work that you've done to support our shelters, but the reality is $69 a night is simply not enough to meet the growing needs of the community that we serve. We are stretched thin, and this funding falls short of providing the dignity, care, and stability our residents deserve. That's why we demand an increase in funding. By investing more, you are giving people the chance to rebuild their lives and help create a stronger, more compassionate community where no one is left behind. Thank you again for all your work.
Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on.
Hi, my name is Chantel Lopez, and I'm speaking in item 2. I'm with Hope the Mission. I think
Great. You have 1 minute. Go ahead. And if you could just pull the mic a little closer to you so we can hear you.
I think you guys forgot that Hope stepped up when you guys had no other organization stepping up. I think you guys forgot that when COVID hit, Hope was the only one housing people from the streets into our shelters. And I think it's time that the city gives that same respect to us and that they step up for us, because $69 a bed is not cutting it, not even 50%. I think it's unfair that we have to do an activation almost every month to pay people who come from the streets, who come from addiction here and are in the front line, are not getting paid enough to save other people's life. And I think the city forgot that. And I think this is why Hope is here as unity for you guys to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Your name and the items you're speaking on.
Carmina Rodriguez, item number 2.
Okay, you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
All right, my name is Carmina Rodriguez, and I'm from Hope the Mission. I'm representing CD14. I want to represent CD14 and CD2. Right now, I'm working for the tiny homes, and I want to represent them because working at CD14 in Highland Park, it's a really expensive area, and there's so many people actually coming in homelessness, and we need the help. We need the money. And as a matter of fact, I actually want to represent and say for my team. There's a lot of my team members that I know. We're also, living check by check, and we're one check from being homeless. So I want to actually, advocate for them too. We need this money. We need the help, you guys. Okay.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on.
My name is Darren Harwood. I'm speaking on item number 2.
Okay, you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
All right. My name is Darren Harwood. I work for Hope the Mission. Right now, I want to speak on our bed rates. We're getting paid $69, and we want to at least be at $89. So I oversee men's recovery and men's reentry. We're changing people's lives. We're helping from homelessness, recovery, showing them how to work in the workplace. And then with the bed rates we have right now, we're losing employees that are going somewhere else to work. So we need you guys to help us with the funding for our beds to help change people's lives. We're growing, but now we're going to regress because we can't even, we have to raise money for the shelters that we do have. But thank you guys for listening.
Thank you very much. Next speaker. Your name and the items you're speaking on.
Hi, my name is Kim Carter. I'm speaking on item number 2.
Okay,
you have guys for your
1 minute. Go ahead.
I want to thank you guys for your time, and I want to thank you guys for being here today. But $69. I work for Hope the Mission. I'm a program manager at Tiny Home Alexandria. We currently have 184 participants living there. Can you imagine feeding 3 hot meals a day, supplying bedding, supplying just supplies, supplying just basic life skills and training and everything that goes on? I want LA to remember 15 years ago, we weren't in this situation. You have to really consider, in order for us to change it, we must take a stand. We must raise the rate. LA has a cost of living that's going higher. We do temporary housing. We're temporary interim housing moving into permanent housing. We've housed over 15 people in the last couple of months into permanent housing, but we can't do it off the funds that you're giving us. We need your help. We need your help. One street, one block, one community. Hope the Mission. Put that in your hearts. When you go home at night, think about it.
Thank you, Speaker. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on.
My name is Michael Tanner, and I work for Hope the Mission, and I'm speaking on item 2.
Okay, you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
I just want to piggyback off something one of my coworkers said. We're not the only ones that are a check away from homeless. You guys are too. Just keep that in mind. Thank you for the floor, but we got to talk because this rate is too poor and it's a joke. $69 a bed, it's not cool, right? And over 12,000 beds are about to go to waste. And while folks are still in the streets, keep struggling, frontline workers are barely scraping by, doing hard by doing hard work, but to pays too dry. So what we need you guys to um, show some humanity, right? And put yourselves in our clients or ourselves shoes. You guys are comfortable. We're the ones struggling. Keep that in mind. Again, we're not the only ones a check away from being homeless. You guys are too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, your name and the items you're speaking on.
Hello, my name is Brenda Castro. I'm representing Hope the Mission. I also am representing Council District 2 interim housing sites.
Okay, you have 1 minute. Assume you're speaking on item 2.
Yes,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to emphasize that $69 is not enough to adequately assist the unhoused community with beds. I'd like to highlight to you all that are present here today that there are people suffering from drug addiction and mental health that are also dying on the streets. If there are no beds, there is really no hope for them. So I do want to emphasize and remind you all when you leave here today that that is still happening on the streets. We need your help to continue to serve this population of the unhoused community, and we also need your help to make sure that all of the staff that work for Hope the Mission or any other agencies in all districts know that they are worth more than what they get paid. Sometimes they're living, paycheck to paycheck, like they just said. So we need you to all understand there are people, not just unhoused, but the people that are working with the unhoused community that are also going through things. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Yes, my
Your
name is
name
Arthur
and
Chavez. I'm representing I Hope the Mission, and I work at Tiny Home Village Chandler in North Hollywood for
Okay.
Council District 2.
Okay, you have 1 minute, speaker.
So I'm on item number 2, and $69 per bed is very low. I have case managers that provide abundance of services to these clients, trying to get them permanently housed, trying to get them off the street, trying to keep them off the street. And they work hard all day, from 8-hour shifts that just go all the way the full 8 hours working, and they take a half-hour lunch break, but $69 is not enough. We have a lot of unhoused, and we're trying to keep them, get them into permanent housing. So I appreciate any kind of funding you could provide us with. $139 would be beautiful. It'll be very helpful, and I believe that it will help get more people off the streets. I have 39 tiny homes at my shelter, and we are full at capacity. All the CD2 shelters are probably full at capacity right now. But, we're providing them fresh food, fresh water, fresh everything. But, this is going to run out if you don't have the funding. So I appreciate any kind of assistance that the council can provide us with. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there other speakers here? Yes, go ahead. Your name and the items you're speaking on.
Hi, Marisa Palvino for item number 2.
Sorry, tell me your name one more time.
Marisa Palvino.
Okay, if you want to pull the mic up, we can make sure and hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, so I'm happy to be here. I want to just say everybody in this room knows it, especially you guys, that $69 is a joke, and it's just simply not enough money to help. We're at a turning point for homelessness in the city. We're seeing it every single day, and the resources that all these shelters get are helping to really, provide dignity, provide a space to live, eat, a pathway towards sustainable future and stability. The current rate, again, is a joke, needs to increase to cover all of these very essential costs for all of our fellow neighbors and human beings that we are looking at and seeing every single day in every single community across Los Angeles and California and the country. These increases, again, allow shelters to provide all of the comprehensive services that they are fighting for every day. And it's an investment as well in our city and our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers in the room? Okay, I think we've exhausted our speakers. I'll call these names one more time. Alana Holt, Casper Lucy, Lily Noah, Lupita Corrales, Matt Nussbaum, Modesti Alvidre, Shane Henson. Last call. Okay. I think with that, we've exhausted public comment in the room, and we can move on to the agenda items. Let's start with item 8. You want to read that into the record, Mr. Lopez?
Motion relative to instructing the Los Angeles Housing Department with the assistance of the city attorney report with recommendations to amend the just cause for eviction ordinance LAMC 165.03 by removing the substantial remodel clause LAMC 165.03 1.2.
Okay, great. So I think we have a few different people here. Actually, you know what? Can we do our consent items first? Why don't we start actually with our consent items? Items 7 and 9, I believe, are our only consent items today, unless there's any objections. No. Okay. All right. So I think we can move items 7 and 9 forward on consent.
Councilmember Rahman?
Yes.
Councilmember Bloomfield? Councilmember Padilla?
Yes.
Councilmember De Leon, absent. Councilmember Rodriguez, absent. 3 ayes, these items are approved.
Sorry about that. So let's go back to item 8. Do you need to read it into the record again? No. Okay, great. So I think we have a couple people here from the city attorney's office, Peter Wolford and Mei Chang. We also have Anna Ortega and Robert Glardy here from LHD. Is that right? Okay. Anyone who's here for item 8, if you could please make your way up to the table. Welcome. Do we have our city attorney reps? Oh, yes. Great. Okay, welcome Peter, welcome Anna.
Thank you.
I think since this is just a motion, I think Mr. Blumenfield had some questions to ask today and some potential changes to make to this item. So why don't I turn the floor over to you?
Great, thanks. I have a couple of amendments, but basically wanted to tell you a little bit about my intent. I mean, we adopted a just cause ordinance mirroring state law so we could have a good neighbor policy. Simple terms, we want to make sure if you're a good tenant that you can stay. But in doing so, we left out an important section. We left an important section intact from AB 1482, the state law which passed in 2019, which established the just cause in California. That section is before us, that no tenant should be evicted from their home due to repairs and remodels, period. To be clear, of course, a landlord has a right and a duty to maintain units and buildings. Many owners want to reinvest. All of that should happen. But let's be honest, we do not have a 100% eviction rate because there's a remodel that needs to take place. In Los Angeles, we can do better. I put this motion forward to fix this problem. I have a couple of amendments to go along with this. Specifically, one is to request that the city attorney draft and transmit an interim control ordinance in order to temporarily remove the eviction process from LAMC 165.03.1.2 until June 1st, 2025, or when this is implemented, whichever comes first. And the idea behind that is simply, we're going to fix this problem. We don't want people to be evicted during that interim phase while we're fixing it. So but we don't want to create an unended time where you can't do evictions. Just during the time, an interim control ordinance during the time while we are fixing this. So that would be basically a 6-month or when we get implemented moratorium. So that's part of it. And second is to direct the housing department to report back with data on a number of things with the following: the number of applicants filed for a substantial remodel for applicable properties, the number of applications filed under the primary renovation program, the number of completed primary renovation program projects, the number of just and reasonable rent increases granted under the RSO by year, the number of pending just and reasonable rent increase applications along with the average processing time, and last, at the suggestion of Councilwoman Padilla, to add in the number of evictions related to new mandated environmental standards such as electrification due to decarbonization. These are all basically report backs just to get data and information. It won't affect the speed and expediency of which this ordinance needs to be put into place.
And I'm happy to second those amendments.
Okay. That's it. Nope. I know we're pressed, so.
Okay, great. Well, since we don't have any questions on this item, Ms. Padilla, did you have any additional comments or questions for? Nope.
Well, yes, thank you. I think those are great amendments, Councilmember Blumenfield, and appreciate the second with that contribution.
Great. Mr. Lopez, can you call the roll?
Councilmember Rahman.
Yes.
Councilmember Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Councilmember Padilla.
Yes.
Councilmember De Leon, absent. Councilmember Rodriguez, absent. 3 ayes, this item is approved.
Great.
As amended.
Thank you very much. So let's move on to we're jumping around this agenda a little bit today. Let's move on to item 1. Mr. Lopez, if you could read that item into the record.
Verbal update from the City Administrative Officer and Los Angeles Housing Department relative to streamlining contracting and invoicing processes for homeless services providers.
Great. And I just wanted to flag for everyone who's here on behalf of a homeless service provider, I have been eager to have a conversation about our bed rates, to talk about exactly what services are being funded at our sites, and to talk about how we can ensure that people are adequately compensated for providing those services, and that those services are visible to us as a city. But there has been another issue plaguing service providers, which is a delay in payments from the City of Los Angeles. Payments have been delayed because of lack of communication between LAHD, LAHSA, the mayor's office, and this is a consistent issue which has led to multiple crisis moments over the past few months, particularly as the amount of expenditure on homelessness has gone up. And so service providers are having to hold significant amounts of debt in order to make payroll. They're actually taking out loans and they're paying interest on those loans, which are not compensated by the contracts. So you're talking about contracts being lower than what you need in order to make your payroll and to do all the services you're supposed to do. And on top of that, service providers are taking on loans in order to meet payroll because of delays in payments. In May of this past year, I submitted a motion asking for this issue to be resolved and for all of the parties within the city, LAHD, CAO, as well as our partners at LAHSA and the mayor's office to get together to figure out how we can ensure that this process is streamlined, that we resolve issues, and that we're not working with an antiquated system, one that was designed for when homeless expenditures at the city were significantly smaller than they are now. And so this is a report, an update on recommendations to changes that are being made to address some of these issues. And I want to invite representatives from LAHD, from CAO, and from LAHSA to speak on this item. If you could join us at the table. Welcome. Okay, go ahead. We have a memo here from the housing department on changes in these procedures. I don't know if you wanted to present some of those changes to us right now.
Good afternoon, Lorena Sanchez with LAHD. Last week we finalized the official memo that will specifically dedicate the advances to LAHSA, and we will be able to advance quarterly advances to LASA from their year contracts, and those do not include contracts for Inside Safe or the ESG, which is a federal grant. Based off of this grant, we were able to advance quarters starting in quarter number 2, and we will be able to continue advancing quarter 3 and quarter 4 based off of the memo. I have some numbers based off of just our updated payment. So as of July 1st, we have made $124 million worth of payments to LASA. Currently, we're outstanding about $57 million, which came in from 10/7 and on. But we are expecting to be able to make that payment now with this LASA advance within the next 2 weeks. Additionally, outside of that, we made an agreement with the CAO's office, LASA, and LAHD to be able to encounter these advances, to be able to proceed and expedite payments moving forward. And we're hoping to be able to alleviate these issues now that the memo is official.
Others? I wanted to have LASA provide feedback on the process, and has it answered some of the questions that you've had? I know this was an issue last time.
Janine Trejo, CFO LASA. The memo, we did work in collaboration with LAHD and city partners. It does, to a certain extent, answer some of the questions that we had and the provider needs. One of the things that I would just like to note is there's still work that has to be done for quarter 1 advances. Quarter 1 advances are being identified that they will not be received until the end of September, beginning of October. It's the same situation with the Q2 advance. LASA did not receive advances for quarter 1 until the end of September, beginning of October, to be able to start paying out actual expenses providers incurred for Q1. And this will present an issue going into the next fiscal year if that's not addressed, where providers will be carrying 3 months of expenses.
I noticed that this particular memo does not include Inside Safe payments, which are actually a substantial amount of the payments that the city is making, many of them that are running through LASA. It's there. Can you shed more light on that? I think, to me, if we're not addressing the payments issues through Inside Safe, as well as the payments issues for quarter 1, then we're not really addressing the payments issue as brought to us initially, and we're going to end up in the same cycle of crisis again.
That is correct. Inside Safe is not part of the advance memo because they are on a quarterly budget system versus a yearly quarterly advance system like the other contracts. So again, just a reminder that that is something that council needs to be incorporated into because it requires a full year contract versus a quarter system.
Can you shed light on why they have a quarterly budget? Because that was not a request by this council, you know.
That would have to come through the mayor's office since it is the mayor's program. My understanding is that they are in conversation to be able to move away from the quarter system and move into a full year contract so that we can advance a larger amount versus approving just a small budget quarterly.
Okay. Do we have a representative here from the mayor's office who can speak to that? Welcome, Deputy Mayor Keller. Welcome, Deputy Mayor Gonifer.
Where should I go?
Can you talk about why the mayor's office has chosen to do quarterly budgets for Inside Safe, which is, I think, the key thing, as far as I understand from LHD, that maybe the key issue preventing us from being able to implement uniform payment mechanisms across the entire city? You know, I think one of the underlying values on this committee, which we've been trying to move towards, is that we have a single homelessness system at the city, not one that's bifurcated between different programs. And, you know, I think that's the quarterly budgets were not an instruction of the council. So I'm curious about how they came about and how we can resolve that.
Yeah, this is Kevin Keller, Deputy Mayor of Housing. Thank you for inviting us to be here today. I know we'll be speaking on some other items later on the hotel portfolio. But just at a high level, I know we have the HEA annual budget. We do prepare monthly reports, and I believe we have looked at doing a 90-day cycle within that. I think there's probably flexibility there.
A 90-day cycle for what? Sorry.
The 90-day projections. I didn't hear the term. I'm sorry. I don't know what the term would be. But I do know from our admin side, which is not here today, that there are differences with the HEA budget. And I looked to our CAO colleagues, and they were up here before. But I don't think there's any objection if there's ways to streamline or align those. We'd love to do that. I don't know if Dr. Gonifer has more to say.
Hi, it's Dr. Gonifer, Deputy Mayor for Homelessness and Community Health. Completely agree with Kevin. We have no issue with providing more detail about the entirety of the fiscal year. As mentioned previously, we provide you all with quarterly projections for all of our Inside Safe operations, but our Inside Safe contract is an annual contract with LAHSA to provide services across all of our interim housing portfolio.
So I wonder if the representative from LAHT could speak to, if there is an annual contract, why we can't do the same process for Inside Safe that we're doing for other contracts. It just doesn't, to me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would we be doing things differently across different pots of money unless there's federal, I know there's federal requirements that prevent us from providing advances for that, but.
Yes, we would have to amend the contract for Inside Safe so that we can include it as a yearly budget, which we'd have to work with the CAO's office, Mayor's office, and LAHD to come to that agreement. We don't hold the budget for LAHD. It's just sent over to us. So that, again, that's something that we would have to work with the 3 departments to make that arrangement.
Sorry, you don't hold a budget for LAHD?
For Inside Safe, it's sent over from the HEA and through the Mayor's office.
Okay, great. So I will say that, you know, I think we've moved a little bit on this issue since I submitted this motion in May, but I will say that I am a little bit frustrated by how slowly we've moved on it. We have to say that we're committing to advances of a contract and then provide our first advance at the beginning of the second quarter for the first quarter. That's not an advance, and it doesn't address any of the issues that the providers brought to us, and it underscores the payment challenges that we're facing across the entire system. I also think that if we're not including Inside Safe in that process, which is a bigger investment, I believe, in total dollars than our other interim housing portfolio. It is bigger, right? Yeah, it's a bigger investment from the city's funds than our entire interim housing portfolio for all of our other interventions, our 6,700 beds or, you know, that we're operating. If we don't incorporate that bigger investment into this process, I think we are missing the mark in terms of these updates. So we'll have our next meeting in 3 weeks. And I would love to see by then the incorporation of Inside Safe into this and any additional changes that we need to make in order to be able to make those changes. If it's a contract change, I think this committee would be very open to approving that. It doesn't seem like there's a substantively different contract in place if it's an annual contract, as you're saying, which is great. And so, you know, I think we're open and ready to discuss whatever we need to do in order to effectuate the same processes across different systems of payment at the city.
The only thing that I would like to add is
Sure.
Part of this review process with looking at the budget and the contracting with Inside Safe, I would like the advances for Inside Safe to be reviewed as well. Currently, as it stands, it's a quarter of the quarter budget.
Right,
So,
but the quarter of the quarter budget is because it's a quarterly budget.
Yes.
You know,
No.
so and I think it's 25% of the budget, but for Inside Safe, it's a quarterly budget. So I think if we're making it into an annual budget, I think that would help us both plan better in terms of our finances as well as ensure that we're able to do the same process. Any other comments from committee members? Go ahead, Mr. Blumenfield.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify. If the 25% advance for roadmap and the other homeless programs has actually occurred, so has the advance for the fiscal year 24-25 programs been encumbered by LAHSA yet?
So the advances for the fiscal year 24-25 Q1 has been received with the exception of Mayfair and the exception of HAP 4. So those advances have not been received, and those are pending receipt by LASA. The other thing is LASA has only received the Q1 advances. We have not received the Q2 advances, and we're already in Q2. So we have to work out the timing in that situation so that this way we have the funding available for our service providers. Part of that was the mechanism by which LASA is able to request advances. And that goes through, it was going through the long process of getting the budget approved, the budget template approved, then getting an invoice template approved. Part of this process was addressing that and streamlining. So hopefully that going forward in Q3, we will have the advance prior to the start of the quarter, so we have the funding available for the service providers.
The whole template thing got, maybe pull more of my hair out in terms of, because we approve it, but we can't really pay it until they go with the template, and we have to approve the template. So it's sort of one of these things where everyone's pointing at each other. So to be clear, except for the HAP and Mayfair, the rest of the 25% has occurred.
Those have occurred, and LASA has started issuing payments to the service providers because of the timing. They're no longer advances, and we've been paying out actual expenses incurred by service providers.
Okay, so that was the question. When has it reached the service providers? And you're saying it has?
We have started paying out service providers. I would just like to note there is one other thing, is that part of this process is that LASA was not always receiving the advances on time, even historically. And so LASA would receive advances sometimes 3 months late, 6 months late. In case of the roadmap, that was 9 months late with the new roadmap. So LASA incurred expenses paying out service providers from our funding. So part of what is happening right now is the reconciliation and replacing of those dollars. We understand the need of the service providers, so LASA has been putting the funding out to the service providers, but LASA also has to make sure that we reconcile and replace the funds that we were essentially cash flowing.
Okay, and the Q2 is only for Inside Safe, right? So what else do we need to do as a council to address the Q2 advance?
Hopefully with the memo, then we can switch to just, instead of going through those budget templates, which is line by line of each individual service provider, that we're able to just submit a memo that notes the 25% advance, which would expedite the process.
Sorry, when you say hopefully, why is that hopefully? Because we're already in Q2.
Because we're already in Q2 and we haven't received the advance yet, but we did work with LAHD on addressing this. That was part of what was going to be in the memo, and some of the items that we were working out with the mechanism for us to be able to do that through the memo, or through LASA submitting a memo in place of those budget templates and invoices.
Okay. And do we have the time, the space where LAHD, CAO, LASA meet on a regular basis to discuss the execution and monitoring of these contracts? How often does that happen?
We do have, would you like to?
LAHD meets with LASA on a weekly basis on Monday mornings and Monday afternoons, separately with accounting and program departments. And then LAHD also meets with the CAO's office and the mayor's office as well weekly.
So weekly?
Yes.
Okay. And then what are the additional steps that we need to take as a city to reform this contracting process? Do we need more staff to get hired or reassigned so we can make sure that we're actually monitoring the contracts to check the invoices for services rendered? Because I understand that's also a big part of the problem. We all believe transparency is really important. Accountability is really important. So additionally, what steps has LAHD taken this year to review the contracts and review the invoices submitted from the service providers to LASA?
So LAHD has our contract directly with LASA, not with the service providers. I think that has always been the misconception that we review sub-provider invoices. We do not do that. Again, our contract is directly with LASA. That's the invoices that we receive directly. Our team at LAHD to handle all of the LASA contract, which is over $800 million yearly, is a team of 5. We are responsible for paying all the invoices, reviewing contracts, amending the contracts, everything that has to do with paying out LASA directly.
Do we even get the invoices?
The invoices from LASA, not the sub-provider.
Not from the service providers?
No, we do not receive those. LASA receives those invoices.
Do you think we should have those for our records?
Again, our contract is directly with LASA, and the sub-providers have contracts with LASA. I believe there is discussion to
By
make
the
modification.
transitive property of A equals B equals C,
yes.
we should therefore, have the obligation from the service providers to be able to. There's nothing that prohibits us from seeing those invoices.
We can ask for them in our contract to that, but again, the manpower of that would be very difficult with a team of 5. For us to realistically be able to accomplish that type of monitoring, we would need to completely revamp that monitoring.
Okay, well, I'd want us to maybe direct them to amend the contract with LASA to require that invoices be submitted. I think the city has to have those invoices on file. Even if we were relying on LASA to do the day-to-day looking at this, we have to have access to that. So I think we should not only ask it, but we should make it a contractual obligation. And in the days of electronic everything, it shouldn't be a big deal.
I do want to mention, though, that, again, if we are asking for that type of request, then we would need to definitely have the council support to be able to have the budget to increase the support staff at LHD, because with the team of 5, there's absolutely no way that we would be able to do anything even if we received the invoices. We would need a huge undertaking to be able to review invoices at that level.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Blumenfield, if I could ask you a question.
Yeah.
In terms of receiving invoices, what is I mean, I think you're right, it is important to ensure that we have access to kind of payment documents from the service providers that we're working with as a city. What is the hope that you have for what we do with those invoices when they come in?
Right.
Because for me, a big focus of the work in this committee has really been on trying to get outcomes data to us, which when we talk to LASA and to the CAO and CLA, which are managing our funds going out to them, what I learned is that the city actually does not manage performance at all. And so we don't receive in any part of the city data. We didn't receive any data about outcomes at all. We do have now access to some through the new data dashboards that LASA has put together after significant work, I think, in partnership with this committee, which is great. But my question is, I think we have to design a system where we're asking for materials in a way that is responsive to what we are planning to do with it, or what kind of oversight we're planning to exercise on it. And so I'm just curious about what your vision is for that.
No, happy. I mean, it's all about transparency, and they're all electronic invoices at this point, so I don't think it should be that big of a deal for us to be able to get them sent to us, so we can spot check things, we can have some accountability. We don't have to just always say, LASA do it, and we're one step removed. This is the taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
We have a response. It's a lot of money.
Yes.
And there's often questions. We want to make sure that we're doing things well. I don't know how many folks at LASA are checking all the invoices. I assume they have a lot of folks. I'd like to learn more about that. But I also, I think that we should have access to that information. Not that we're going to hire a huge staff to duplicate what LASA is doing, but that we have the information to do the spot checks that we need. And again, it's electronic. You don't need 10 staff members to receive, to have access to documents.
So yeah, to be clear, I was not pushing back on the idea that we should have it. I'm responsive to your question, which is, if we do get additional invoices, what will we do with those invoices, and how are we staffed to do what we need to do with those invoices? And that does seem to be a slightly different question from what we're discussing in this payments process, but perhaps not, perhaps not. Go ahead, Ms. Padilla.
So I completely can tell where you're coming from, Councilmember. I do think it's important that we have access to looking at what traditional invoicing looks like for the sake of transparency. And I also see where you're coming from. Like, well, what are we going to do with this overload of information worth of $800 million in invoices? But this leads me to actually have two questions for LASA. One is they have 5 employees monitoring the invoices that come from you to the city. How many employees are LASA employees overseeing the invoices coming from the service providers? That's one. And two, when folks invoice, what exactly are you asking them to be part of the invoicing packages? Is this where they report the outcomes, the narratives, the counts specifically to services? I'd like to know that.
So first, LASA has submitted provider invoices for Inside Safe. That's part of the process. So provider invoices have been getting submitted over for review with the Inside Safe. LASA has all.
Is that the entire 800 million?
No, I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
And LASA has also provided all prior invoices for the prior years to the controller's office. And so we're working with the controller's office and the dashboard that he is building out and his review of the provider invoices. So LASA has been working with the city to ensure that the data is provided. The team is our grants management team that reviews the service provider invoices. That is, they are reviewing the HUD invoices that come for the federal dollars. Those same staff are reviewing the state funding sources. They are reviewing the county funding sources. They are reviewing the city funding sources and any philanthropy funding sources. And there's approximately 20 individuals that are doing that. All funding sources from all of the 5 different entities. Part of what their process is also, they are now incorporating the data dashboards to have provider meetings, which is reviewing what the financials are, as well as what the performance is for the program. What the service providers submit is they enter all of their information in HMIS, which is part of the data dashboards, and that is for the performance. For their invoicing, they submit their general ledgers, they submit their trial balances, they submit their profit and loss statements, and then LASA also does monitoring of the individuals. There is desktop monitoring that is done. There is on-site monitoring that is conducted as well. And part of that monitoring is reviewing all of the receipts for the service providers and for a specific time period and sampling.
And these 20 individuals, because when I think of a grants management team, and it sounds like they have a big workload in terms of receiving funds. Are they also the same team that then does the invoicing out?
No, that is our accounts receivable team that then takes the provider invoices and all of the general ledgers that is input into our accounting system. They roll that up and they submit to the to LAHD.
Okay, and how many people work on that?
Currently, there's 2. There's 4 positions.
So there's 4 positions of people that are giving the service provider their check.
There's 4 people that are invoicing to the funders to receive the revenue so that we can then pay out the service providers.
Okay, so
and that's across all of the funding sources that LASA has.
I guess I'm trying to figure out who manages you receiving your pot of dollars and then who works on giving it to the service providers.
So the contract management of the service providers and reviewing of their invoices is the grants management team. They go through and they review the general ledgers, they review the invoices that are received, they do any disallowing of costs, they then approve those invoices. Those invoices then get migrated to our accounting system. And then the accounts receivable team takes that and they package it up to submit to LAHD. With Inside Safe, they take all of the service provider invoices, they download those, and then they upload them to the shared folder.
Yeah, but I didn't ask about when you get money to LAHD. I want to know who does the work to get the money to the service providers.
So then once the accounts receivable receives those funding that we requested from our funders, our accounts payable team then pays out. They review all of the invoices that have been submitted, and they pay out provided on those invoices.
So it sounds like you have a system where you have more team members dedicated to make sure you get the money to LASA, but you have a smaller amount of people actually working on getting the money to the service providers. Is that what I'm hearing?
No. You had asked about the accounts receivable team, and you had asked about the...
Which you said is 4, and you said grants management is 20.
Yes, and that's not just city funding sources. That is across all funding sources.
You mentioned that the grants management team is in charge of making sure you get your federal money, your state, your county, and your city. So you have 20 people dedicated to making sure that public dollars get to LASA. But what I'm trying, and then it sounds to me like it's then, so they have it, and then it sounds like it's accounts receivable who looks to make sure that they cross their T's, dotted their I's before they get the money. And that's 4 staff that you have working on that?
No. We have 20 staff that review service provider invoices. They are the ones that conduct that review and dot the I's and cross the T's and review all of the expenses from the service providers. That's 20 staff across all 5 funding entities. They then process that, push it over to our accounting system. Our accounts receivable team package that information up and submit it to LAHD. Our accounts payable team then reviews all of the information from the invoices that were submitted to our funders, the funding that came in, and they pay out the invoices that were packaged on there.
I guess I'm hearing an extra step. So after accounts receivable, it then goes to LAHD.
After accounts receivable, it is submitted to LAHD. The funds are then received, and then our accounts payable team conduct the review of the invoices that we submitted to the funders. And if we requested $200,000 for agency ABC, then they pay out $200,000 to agency ABC.
So it sounds circular.
It's
from accounts receivable, it goes to LAHD and then back to you guys before it gets to the service provider?
Yes, the funding, because the contract is with LASA, the funds are received by LASA, and LASA has to then pay out the service providers.
You know what would be helpful? If this team can provide an infographic that explains all of this for the public. Given the rise in the use of graphs and tables and popular education tools to explain this, I think it's important that we get this.
Okay.
Can I make that as a motion?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I
graphic for how LASA is processing
and how it works with LAHD and all of our city entities, with making sure that it's clear on when and how it finally gets to the service provider.
I would like to say that LASA, immediately upon receiving those funding, we start paying out the service providers within the same day.
Yeah.
So we immediately start pushing the funds out the day that LASA is paid the funds from LAHD.
And how many people on your team are dedicated to that?
There's 4 for the accounts payable and pushing that out.
Okay, I think,
yes.
I think I heard what I think I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at, you guys did submit to the budget committee a table, which I'm looking at, about the administrative budget. And I see that there are 705 staff members at LASA who are tagged as part of the administrative budget. So as part of your infographic to try to figure out where all those pieces go. And I know the lion's share of them, 232 are with access and engagement, which is probably appropriate in terms of dealing with the folks on the street. I'm not implying that there's too many. Just trying to figure out, looking at the numbers of 700 folks, and then we're sort of splitting hairs on some of these smaller numbers, is how it all fits together, and whether or not there's some rejiggering that can be done that help smooth this contracting process out, so we can get that done as fast as possible.
We can share the information on the FTEs. I would like to say, in regards to the 700 staffing, that when it comes to admin dollars, there's a cost allocation plan that has been shared with LAHD. It has been approved. And part of that cost allocation plan pulls in the admin dollars that LAHSA receives. LAHSA receives 2.5% off of all city funding sources. Granted, and we're very grateful that the city general fund provides 15%. That 15% has allowed it to go up from 1% to 2.5%. So LAHSA overall admin is only 5%. So the 5% is what is funding those 700 staff, and it funds LAHSA's core functions. The LAHSA's core functions are those of the grants management, of data management, of the contracting, all of those activities that go into the service providers. The core functions of LAHSA, being the Joint Powers Authority, is what that 5% funds.
Right. I guess we're trying to figure out, because I know both LAHSA and LAHD are saying they need more staff. You know, we're trying to understand that and where our dollars should go. It's finite, but we want to make sure we understand where they should go.
Thank you, Mr. Blumenfield. I just wanted to pause here for a second. Audience members may notice that we have lost quorum today. This is really frustrating for me. We have a number of important items on this agenda. Other meetings were scheduled at the same time, and members who are committed to coming are not here. And I'm really frustrated about that. However, we will have the capacity to continue discussion. Many of these items we could not move on today, or were simply discussion items, and we'll have to come back to this committee regardless of what, you know, whether we had quorum or not. But I do just want to underscore how just how frustrating this is. And I hope that we will be able to work with council leadership to be able to ensure that these kinds of disruptions don't occur in the future. And to everyone who's here today, I think we are honoring your desires to see deep conversation and discussion about these items. We take this very seriously. I personally take this very seriously. Many of these items are on the agenda because of my interest in pushing them forward. And I know Councilmember Blumenfield feels the same way, but you know, it is what it is. And the city attorney has a message to share with the public. Thank you.
So, and this is Jonathan Grote with the LA City Attorney's Office. So just to clarify what's going to happen here, because there's no longer a quorum, the actual H&H meeting is finished. So I don't know, and this is a question for the clerk's office and ITA, if we need to take a short, well, it wouldn't be a recess. There's not a meeting currently going on. The two members, effectively, if they want to continue, will be holding what's essentially a town hall. So the presentation can continue, the discussion can continue, but the body is not in session to take any action. So I just want to make sure that's clear to everybody who's listening. And again, ITA and the clerk's office, do we need to take a break just to? Okay, thank you. They have to stop it. We'll have to continue because it can't be a part of the recording for this meeting.
Can there be a separate recording?
We can ask if they want to have a separate.
Yeah, we're going to have a separate recording, and with the discussion will continue today, because I think there'll still be requests to departments to move forward.
Yeah, so we are going to discuss item 2, just so folks know who are leaving, who care about that.
Yeah, we're still going to talk about item 2. You can stay. We can't move the item forward.
So our moment for the chair is without a quorum. It's not a fair and equitable thing. I'm so thankful for your work in particular.
This is not my choice, and I believe me, I feel as frustrated as you do. I just want to say that the discussion, like, we are still going to be discussing items that are important in front of this committee. We are still going to be taking them very seriously. We're still going to be moving things forward in terms of requests for more information that will help us take decisions on the things that you came here to talk about. I welcome you all to stay. And I just want to say I share your frustration on these issues 100%, and I'm sorry about that.
I'm very appreciative of your time. But to be honest, over 150 people waited outside, and there is not another vendor in the city that has to take time off work to beg to justify line items, to ask, how do we underfund people who are dying on our streets? And it's disproportionately people that are racist, bigoted, policy is written out.
Rowan, I hear you, and I just want to say, you know, I've been asking these questions. I do answer. I do take this really seriously, and again, this is not, you know, I am here in full respect of your time. We had allotted a long amount for public comment. We were moved to a different room, which could not accommodate the amount of public comment. We lost quorum because of a scheduling issue that was not under my control. I just want to say, again, this is not an issue that I take with any less seriousness than you do. And I just want to underscore again, many of these items are moving forward because I put them on the agenda.
I'm very thankful for that. I just can't ask for already struggling with the burden of systemic underpayment to stay and continue to have their kids in childcare because now there isn't even a quorum. I know
that's your choice. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Could we get our timely? Yeah, just come back to the. Okay, great. So we have a request, and do we have? Ms. Trejo, do you want to join us again? For item 1. Great. Okay, let's finish up at least item 1, and then we can move on to the other items when we start the stream again. I think there was, I just want to clarify what the requests have been. There was a request to LASA to provide information about accounting and accounting processes, engagement with LAHD, and kind of the flow chart for requesting payments and receiving them. I have seen this internally, so I know it exists, but I actually don't know what exists on the LASA side. I know it for the LAHD side. What was your other question? Oh, I wanted to, Mr. Blumenfield had asked about including invoice receipts as part of our collection efforts. You know, I think we should, I don't know if you remember in the last Housing and Homelessness Committee that we had a presentation from the City Controller about a new website that they have created, which has actually for Roadmap and for Alliance started putting up all of our interim housing efforts through that, as well as invoices submitted through that. And I think it would be a useful exercise to understand how we could expand that same accountability system to all of the payments that we're making as a city. And so that would be the question that I would want answered in our next meeting on this issue. Finally, I just wanted to say that, you know, we had asked also about including inside safe payments as part of the quarterly payment process, moving from a quarterly budget process to an annual budget. And so I hope that in our next meeting, we'll see progress on that, as well as any actions that you want this committee to take in order to effectuate that annual payment so that all payments being made by the city are being made along the same, based on the same timelines. And then finally, I do want to say that, you know, there in the memo about changes that are being made about streamlining the invoice process, there are mentions made of a broader systemic issue that, and reform on that will take time. I think we don't have clarity on what those broader systemic issues are. Some of those are addressed here, but not all. And so I think it would be useful for this committee in our next meeting to understand what those broader systemic issues are, because even addressing these smaller issues has taken quite a long time. And I'd really like to ensure that we're starting on the systemic changes, whether it be bringing together different city staff into one department, ensuring that we're adding staff to hold, to monitor and spot check invoices as needed in order to ensure that we are, holding our service providers accountable as much as LASA is, ensuring that we're incorporating performance metrics into our review process now that we have access potentially to a new SRS as well as a data dashboard and KPIs from LASA, ensuring that we're reviewing those as part of our process. In addition to any changes that you need to make in order to ensure that we're not doing a multi-step or multi-stage process in order to process payments. In the first iteration of this conversation, which actually we started 2 or 3 years ago, LAHD had actually put forward recommendations to move to multi-year contracts rather than single-year contracts so that the recontracting process wouldn't take so long and that there wouldn't be a time lag. I think bringing up some of the thinking behind that discussion again and understanding how that process might help us both plan for the future more effectively and hold our service providers accountable more effectively, I think would be very useful. So I look forward to seeing that in our next meeting. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're not being live streamed, but we're being recorded. Okay. Okay, great. Let's move on to item 2, which is the bed rate increase. And we have a number of people here on this issue. We have representatives from the CAO, from the CLA. So welcome everybody. I want to acknowledge that we're in a very important moment in our interim housing system. We've known for a long time that we've had to reprocure the entire system and that would come with an inevitable increase in the nightly bed rate. We've also heard from many of our service providers about the challenges that they're facing with the rates that they're getting, which for some beds are shockingly low, $30 to $50. Now we are looking forward to making sure that we have a better system, a system that adequately compensates service providers for the work that they're doing, and also brings greater accountability for the city as we're moving through providing these services at a scale that this city has really never done before the past couple of years, which is a huge change. There are real costs that will come with changes like these. And as costs increase, I think I have a real fear that we will lose shelter beds, and I don't want that to happen. And so I think making sure that we're finding the pathway forward that helps us keep our beds open, that ensures that these are successful sites, this is really important. Even as we are trying to ensure that the losses or extremely thin margins that homeless service providers are operating under are not the situation that they're facing anymore. Do we need to read this item into the record?
Item 2.
Yeah.
City Administrative Officer, Chief Legislative Analyst, and Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority reports relative to the interim housing bed rates adjustment and related matters.
Great. I want to welcome our CAO, CLA, and LASA reps. If you want to take it away.
Good afternoon, council members. Kendra Leal with the Office of the City Administrative Officer, and I'm joined here by Annabelle Gonzalez from the CAO and our colleagues from the Chief Legislative Analyst and the Los Angeles Homeless Services Agency. Also with us today are our partners with the County CEO Homeless Initiative. Thank you to those individuals who shared public comment and to all service providers for the important work that they do to support people experiencing homelessness within the city and the county. The value of their work is undisputed. We are here today to discuss the proposed interim housing bed rate formula as a result of the collaborative working group that the CAO, CLA, county departments, and LAHSA have been a part of. The reports that are before you for consideration represent a consensus of city, county, and LAHSA representatives. For background, Apt Associates began work on a cost analysis of interim housing operations in October 2022 when selected by LAHSA in coordination with the county CEO HI. In August 2023, Apt Associates released the results of the study. During this study, 125 IH sites serving diverse populations in different service planning areas or SPAs across Los Angeles County were identified to participate in a survey to provide detailed information about IH operations and costs that encompass different expense categories. Costs may include case management, meals, housing navigation, connections to mainstream benefits, referrals to outside services, as well as actual site shelter costs. 16 of these providers, representing a diverse set of IH sites, were further selected to be interviewed to further review costs associated with IH. The largest cost associated with providing IH services was reported to be staffing, and Apt Associates noted that staffing costs were most likely underreported due to hiring challenges and constant turnover. As a result, this report provides some key recommendations to stakeholders, which included to 1, immediately increase nightly bed rates across the interim housing portfolio in Los Angeles County. To address this, the City Council and Mayor approved an initial increase to interim housing nightly bed rates for city-funded interim housing sites on January 9, 2024. These rates went into effect retroactively on January 1, 2024. As a following step, a working group was formed with representatives from CAO, CLA, county departments, LAHSA, and Apt Associates to address the additional recommendations, such as work towards a more defensible and empirically driven bed rate formula, which is transparent as well. Also to consider wear and tear at facilities and other unexpected costs are covered. The bed rate formula before you today includes these considerations as part of the consensus reached by city, county, and LAHSA representatives. The additional recommendations within the IH cost study by Apt Associates are still under consideration by the working group, which are to consider yearly inflation costs and for public funders to continue to research and understand staffing challenges that service providers are facing, such as living wages, pay inequities, burnout, and staff retention. As stated, the city, represented by CAO and CLA, the county departments led by the county CEO, HI, and LAHSA have come to a consensus to make the recommendation to council and mayor based on the data collected by Apt Associates.
The proposed formula is made up of 6 main funding components: facility expenses, which includes property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and utilities; food costs, which includes 3 meals per day; supply costs such as furniture and office supplies; client support services costs, which includes clothing and program activities; on-site staff compensation costs, and a 12% administration rate for service providers. This slide shows the rates by intervention prior to January 1st, 2024 increase earlier this year. LAHSA reports that the last time that the adult interim housing portfolio was procured was 7 years ago. This slide shows the rates after the increase earlier this year by intervention type. This was based on a proposal from LAHSA to either bring interventions up to a baseline of $60 per bed or an increase of 10% if the rate was already higher than $60. Under the newly proposed interim housing formula, the proposed rates fall into 2 different structures based on number of beds. The first for sites with 50 beds or less, and the second at 51 beds or more. It was found that at sites of 50 beds or less, staff costs were higher due to the inability to scale the number of staff to the number of participants. Additionally, a certain number of staff are required to be on site to allow for coverage of breaks or if someone calls out. This is a change from the previous rate structure where rates were broken out by intervention type. Additionally, on-site staff compensation was considered at 3 different tiers of wages, beginning at $20 an hour, $22 an hour, and $25 an hour for base staff. In addition, the approval of a 12% administration rate for service providers is recommended in order to align with the county's current policy.
This working group of city, county, and LAHSA representatives came to a consensus regarding what would be included in the interim housing bed rate formula and recommend rates for approval for increases beginning January 1st, 2025 and July 1st, 2025, which are explained in our office's report. The implementation of the effective dates for rates are based on the level of staffing on site and the ability of service providers to fully meet the requirements of the updated Scope of Required Services, or SRS. The term level staffing refers to current staffing on site at all interim housing sites. Based on the extensive coordination and discussion that have been held, this office recommends the proposed bed rates go into effect in 2 phases. The first phase of the bed rates will go into effect starting January 1st, 2025. These rates reflect the level staffing at Tier 1 staff wages, which are $79 per bed per night for for sites with 50 or less beds, and $69 per bed per night for sites with 51 beds or more. The second phase would go into effect at the beginning of the fiscal year 2025-26 on July 1st, 2025, which supports the enhanced staffing model at Tier 1 staff wages. These rates are $116 per bed per night for sites with 50 beds or less, and $89 per bed per night for sites with 51 beds or more. Enhanced staffing refers to the model that includes additional staff, such as janitors, kitchen staff, and maintenance staff, all of which are not necessarily accounted for in current bed rates. The July 1st rates will coincide with LAHSA's procurement of the single adult portfolio, which is summarized in their memo dated September 26, 2024. In addition, the finalized base SRS, which will standardize the types of services provided in any IH site in the county, can be found in the CLA report dated September 27, 2024, in Council File 23-1348. The goal was to clearly define expectations for services to be provided at sites in relation to IH nightly bed rate increases, and to define more robust reporting and metrics. These next 2 slides show the side-by-side comparison between the rates for sites with 50 beds or less and for sites with 51 beds or more. As previously mentioned, the main difference between the site delineation is that staff costs are higher at smaller sites due to the inability to scale the number of staff to the number of participants.
If the recommended rates are approved, it will represent an increase of 62% over an 18-month period from 2023 to July 2025 for sites with 51 beds or more, and an increase of 111% over an 18-month period from 2023 to July 2025 for sites with 50 beds or less. This is based on an initial rate of $55. An estimated total amount of $141 million has been budgeted for all city-funded interim housing programs for this fiscal year. If the rates are approved to go into effect on January 1st, 2025, at the recommended Tier 1 level service rate, an additional $6.3 million is estimated in order to support the bed rate increase. Sites that are currently operating at rates that are higher than what is approved will not be impacted by these increases. For next fiscal year, an additional $45 million above level funding would be necessary to support the existing portfolio for a proposed budget amount of $186 million. Please note that there is a technical correction for the fiscal impact statement within the CAO report. The report states $179.4 million, but the correct impact for fiscal year 2025-26 is $186 million. Inside safe rooms are not included in these estimates and will not be impacted by these increases since the rates were procured last year. Based on Council's approval, this office will release funding recommendations in future reports to support these costs. Although HAP funds will primarily support these increases, additional analysis is required to identify city funding sources.
On August 7th, 2024, the Housing and Homelessness Committee presented questions and concerns to be addressed by the CAO and CLA offices through the bed rate analyses. These questions primarily related to accountability, performance tracking, budget implications, enhanced services, and staffing. These questions are addressed in the reports from CLA and our office. One component that is not included in the proposed formula are leasing costs. In the city's current bed rates, lease costs are not considered included and are paid separately by the city, which is different from the county's policy where leasing is included. The city currently pays for lease at 12 locations for a fiscal year 25 budgeted cost of $7.5 million. 3 of these sites are on publicly owned land for a reduced rate. It is not recommended that the city incorporate the proposed lease amount for permanent structures, i.e. brick and mortar, and temporary structures because even though the overall lease funding would increase to over $12 million, 2 existing sites would be left underfunded if the rates were applied. Another component that is not included in the proposed formula or in the updated SRS is housing navigation. During the APT Associates study, many service providers reported costs related to housing navigation. However, housing navigation is funded based on a different methodology than the nightly bed rates. Housing navigation is based on an annual rate of currently of $5,146 per slot per year, where a slot can turn over 2 to 3 times per year. The next steps in relation to the interim housing bed rate formula is, upon approval of the rates, our office will return with recommendations for funding. Additional consideration for future cost of living adjustments will also continue to be discussed within the working group, and we will provide recommendations for approval in a future report. For context, any additional increases beyond the recommended January 1st, 2025 and the July 1st, 2025 rates will be considered for implementation sometime after June 30th, 2025. The items for council consideration are the proposed rates effective January 1st, 2025 and July 1st, 2025, the administrative cost percentage, and the updated scope of required services. This concludes our presentation, and I will hand it over to my colleagues for any comments.
No specific comments from LASA.
Do you want to share your timeline?
Yeah, the timeline for the level staffing rates would be to get those payments out to providers for the starting date of January 1st, 2025, and then secondly, the additional increase in rates for the July 1st, 2025 contract.
Okay, and then did you want, John, did you want to present now or? Why don't we talk about the rates first, and then we can talk about the SRS. But you've been in the rates discussions, right? If you want to join them at the table, I think that would be great, but we can. I can wait. Okay. Okay. I also wanted to, if possible, invite 2 of our service provider partners to the table to just provide their feedback on these proposed rates. We have as Mr. Van Sleeve has been here, has made his voice very, very clear. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we also have Ms. Lewis. Yes, welcome. I knew your first name. Sorry. Okay. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to provide feedback because I noticed, you know, the APT Associates study came out of a survey of providers, But I noticed that in the discussions between CIO, CLA, and LASA, service providers, I don't believe have been involved in those discussions. So I wanted to make sure as we were moving this forward that we had an opportunity in this committee to hear from you as well. So welcome to the table, and we invite your feedback on these proposed rates and the report as a whole.
Well, thank you for having us, and thank you for considering this. We have been talking about this for years, as you know, and are grateful to see some data to support what we've been saying for years, that we are not fully funded to operate these programs. I think that, you know, some of the things I just want to say is the key reasons we're pushing for this. Even prior to inflation, we were pushing for this, but now because of inflation and the rising cost of food, I heard the comment about the lease. I didn't think that was for a specific portfolio, but to be very clear, most of us are paying lease costs for our interim housing sites. So I think I just want to clarify that. And obviously, leases have built-in increases, and so that's a factor. Food for us has gone up at minimum 15%, depending on the location. I do really appreciate the economies of scale approach, because at one of our houses that serves, I would arguably the most vulnerable population, enhanced bridge housing for older adults, our Silver Villa site that serves 70 and 80-year-olds, we've been in deficit ever since that started. We can only do 16 people there because of the zoning codes in the city, depending on how it's zoned, and literally we're up to almost $100,000 every year that's unfunded for that population. And so it's critically important. And I also want to offer that I understand that in your roles, there's a delicate balance in terms of trying to be responsive to what we're telling you we need, but also the recognition there's a finite amount of money. But we cannot continue to operate. We've been talking about it for years, but we have literally reached a critical point where many of the providers are planning demobilization, as I think some of you know, because it's no longer sustainable. And I think that even though there's a finite amount of money, that the quality of the services we provide, our employees deserve to be paid well. It's very disturbing to us.
Pause for a second. Audience members, it is actually hard for me to hear what the presenters are saying. So just wanted to flag that for you. If you could,
thank you.
Keep it down.
Thank you for the support, though. But
yes.
Yeah, she needs to hear.
Appreciate your enthusiasm, of course, and I know how important this is. Thank you.
Yeah. So I mean, what's at question here is the fact that our employees deserve a livable wage, and our employees deserve to not have to be overworked, because we can't keep employees because we don't pay a livable wage, right? We need quality facilities. Obviously, there's upkeep that comes along with this. Obviously, we want to have robust safety and security protocols. It's also costly. And so there's just a number of things that have become unsustainable as it relates to the current rates. And I know that there's a phased approach, but I would offer, if we know that it costs the amount you all are looking at for phase 2, we need that amount in January, is what I would offer to you all. And the balancing act, while we understand it, I think that we have done this so long despite our bottom lines being impacted because of our mission-driven organizations, because of our deep commitment, and because we tried to continue to be a good faith partner to the city and all of our funders. But we also are businesses, right? And unfortunately, we have reached the point where we're still committed, but the red continues to grow. We still have the issues that you raised in number 1 with the contracting and late payments, and why we're incurring costs daily, and you all are paying loss a month quarterly. We're incurring costs daily. We're paying out those costs and billing you all monthly. Why loss is being paid quarterly, even if we do consolidate and get Inside Safe on track? That still doesn't make any sense. And as you mentioned, millions of dollars. And so we've just reached a point where we're glad this is seriously being considered, but we need the phase 2 rates right now. And the last thing I would say is that, you know, in the last month, 15 of my own employees are either literally living in their cars, living in shelters, or absolutely at risk right now if we don't do something about them becoming homeless. And 15, that's not a made-up number, that's an actual number. We set up an emergency fund 2 years ago to support, plus some people that are not eligible. 15 people already outdoors or about to be outdoors. It's not unique to Hopix. Across our sector, people are really struggling, and I think that, you know, we are the community we serve. We lift up lived experience. We encourage folks with lived experience and people that are also a part of these marginalized communities to come join our workforce and then we continue to not be able to support them in the way we should. So thank you for the consideration, but we need phase 2 money on January 1.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. And if you could just share with us how many beds you operate for the city of Los Angeles and how many employees you have.
Yeah, we have about 520 employees, and I just know of 15, there may be more that are struggling. And on any given night, I don't know the distinction, but we're keeping about 1,500 people off the street every night, and that includes like 300 to 400 kids because there's families, and probably about 70% of that is funded by the city.
70%?
Mm-hmm.
And do you also operate DHS, DMH beds?
No, we don't do DMH and DHS beds.
Okay.
All the crisis and interim housing, we're the largest family interim housing provider. One of our ABH sites is a family site. We're the largest inside safe provider as well, 250 people every night in that program, and some of the other special initiatives as well.
Great. Thank you so much. Mr. Van Sleep.
Yeah, look, first off, I want to say thank you so much, both for your leadership on this issue, for what this committee is doing, for bringing this topic to the front. I'm truly thankful, and I think I'd be amiss if I didn't acknowledge the people who are really doing the work. Many of them are behind me each and every single day, are on the front lines, making a difference, because our city's better than this. We're better than a city where people are passing away in our streets. I also want to thank and acknowledge those outside. We had representatives from a number of temples, both Sikh and Jewish, a number of churches that came out. And in this moment of risk, I think that it's really important to acknowledge what this moment means. When I came to this city in '99, I fell in love with it. And I was struck by a city where anything could happen, where you could achieve every single one of your dreams, but we allowed people to languish on the streets. And in 2016, we acknowledged that homelessness was an emergency. And homeless service providers across the city were asked to step in and scale at a tremendous rate. And I remember being given personal promises by the CFO of LASA, from people in the mayor's office, from city council offices. Please, in the middle of the pandemic, if you will step up, if you will take these losses on the other side of the contract cycle, we will find a way not to make us whole, not to repay any debt, but to walk towards paying the full cost of care. Mm-hmm. And this is a really important bit because we were people of our word. We signed up and we took those losses. Those losses have mounted and mounted to a place that's unsustainable. Earlier last week, I was asked to fill out a survey along with over 50 other providers, and we stand shoulder to shoulder with the Homeless Service Provider Coalition. And in that survey, we had to identify how many beds we're looking at giving up in the next 3 to 6 months. That number is well over 1,200 beds that are currently roadmap beds that are at risk of being pulled from the system. And in reading the report, I honestly, I'm a fairly savvy guy. I can understand most things. Sometimes I got to read it twice. I can't understand some of the logic here. This is a critical issue in our city, and I believe the greatest city on earth. I believe this is fundamental to our core services of our city to shelter the unhoused. And at $69, these beds are going to be left empty. People are not going to get service because when we fail to fund the services, we fail the people needing those services. And we're going to see more people die on our streets. And that's not acceptable. And I know that we have aligned agendas here, that you believe this. So we're asking very clearly for in January, for the $89 bed rate spoken about in July, to be granted to the homeless service providers without increasing services. They can't afford to increase services. And then begin a constructive conversation towards full cost. And I want to be clear, I understand that's going to be a while. Our city is not in a position to meet every need with full cost. But this issue is truly a humanitarian crisis outworking on our neighbors on our streets. Once again, I want to thank you all for your time.
Yeah. Thank you. And I just wanted to clarify, Ms. Lewis and Mr. Van Sleep, you spoke to the timing of the increase to $89. I wonder, Ms. Lewis, if you could speak to the $89 proposed bed rate as well. And
yeah, it's my understanding this is for single adults, right? CLA folks. So I think that, we just had a bump, which brought some folks up from desperately low numbers in the last year. But I think the $89 is a good start. Right, that's why you didn't hear me talk about it needs to be more. Certainly, I think that what needs to happen is that in the same way we're asking for parity for our employees to be paid in line with the city employees, LAHSA county employees, right, and for those calculations to be built in to allow for those increases year to year, I think $89 is a good start. And my request would be that we don't have to come to a crisis mode where you all are hearing about demobilization to get us to this point, that we are constantly, at least every year, if not every 2 years, looking at built-in increases to account for inflation and to account for rising costs, not only salaries, but the rising costs that I mentioned at the top of my comments. And so, yes, I think the $89 is a good start, and we would like it to be a start on January 1st. The other thing, if I may, really quickly, just want to say, with the potential demobilization, which is heartbreaking for many of our organizations that have spent a lot of investment and time and philanthropy is invested in the standing up. I know I've heard some things from council members like, well, we'll just find another provider. I have to say, not only have our service provider network been holding up the system in many different ways in terms of filling the gaps and piecemealing, but there's lots of other things that we bring to the system that just plugging somebody in the hole is going to very clearly demonstrate the loss. And so if you think we'll just move you and put them in because they'll take a lesser rate, I have to just inform you all that we bring a lot more to the system than just being willing to deal with the challenges of the system. And I'm concerned about the structure, the nature, the strength of our system, because we hold it up in many ways that may not be as obvious to you all.
Thank you so much to both of you for being willing to share. Mr. Van Slaveuch, is there a documentation that you wanted to share with members of the committee as well?
Yeah, so I brought a letter for each of the committee. I guess that...
We'll get it to them.
Okay,
yeah,
very good.
We'll make sure they have it before the next meeting for sure.
And then just to highlight on the $89, I think that the reason that the coalition has surrounded ourselves and said this is a rate that's acceptable is degrees of pressure matter. The homeless service provider community is under such pressure right now, they're not able to innovate. They're not able to find ways to lower the cost. We desperately need a rate that will allow us to breathe enough that every time we run payroll, it's not on a line of credit. And at $89, I think you'll find that our provider community will rise to the level and will bring some great solutions to the table. And I believe our council will too.
Great. Thank you very much to both of you. And we sincerely appreciate your providing your feedback, for your leadership in this, and we will stay in touch as we move through this process.
Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
I had some questions about this, but why don't I turn it over to Mr. Blumenfield to kick us off, and then we can move to my questions.
Sure. And I'm happy to start sort of with an overview of, I completely agree with the service providers. We cannot expect them to make up this gap. It's not sustainable, and they're doing an incredible job raising money to fill the gap, and major praise to them for doing that. So we need to figure out something. But I also want to say, the city, at the end of the day, the city's putting in all this money. And it's actually the county's responsibility. The city should not be actually paying a dime towards services. Under the welfare code, that falls under the county. So every dollar that we put in is basically to do what the county should be doing when it comes to services. And all of these agreements we keep going back and forth on and trying to see how much we can negotiate and what we can do. It's painful because we don't actually have money for services. The only dollars we have is that the state HAP money that we're able to use, and we try to use that. But I would ask the question, if we raise the rate, there's not enough money in HAP. Even if we spent, and I'll ask it as a question, if we raise the rate to 89, like we should right away, that would be a $44 million bump. Is there enough money in HAP if we took all the HAP money and put it toward that? I know the answer, but go ahead and tell me.
Yeah, the answer is no.
That's what I thought.
Not for this fiscal year. We do not have enough for all of the funds that are dedicated towards towards interim housing. We would be short at 89 starting in January.
We would be short $89 million.
We would be short if we went to 89 starting in January.
Right.
We do not have enough to cover that, and it's Matt Szabo, City Administrative Officer.
Okay. So the only other, is there any other source besides the general fund?
Principally, we cover interim housing through HAP and the general fund.
Right. So here we have a county responsibility that we are funding through HAP, and the HAP money could also be used for doing the other responsibilities we have around homelessness, building housing, which is what we have a responsibility as a city to do, is to create the throughput so that the interim housing works. Because the interim housing doesn't work if you don't have a throughput, if you don't have places for people to go after the interim housing. So we're kind of cannibalizing ourselves because we're not getting the money from the county that we need for this. We use all our HAP money on this, and we end up limiting the amount of throughput that we can have, which continues the problem, and it's a vicious cycle. So this is very concerning, and we've talked about budget. We don't have general fund. We're scraping our reserve fund, and we're in a very dire situation. We can't pay for anything right now with our general fund, nor, frankly, should we, because again, the welfare code says it's clearly the county's responsibility to pay for the services. So all of that being said, we're not getting the money from the county, so we have to figure this out. But ultimately, what is it going to mean? It means we figure it out. But if we pay what folks need to basically keep open, still subsidizing the work, we're not going to have the same amount of services, and we're not going to be able to serve the same number of people. Is that right?
Councilman John Wickham with the CLA, and I'm sorry to take a sideways step here, but I'm trying to understand something. When you use the word services, what do you mean?
I'm referring not just to the enhanced. I'm referring to everything. I'm referring to the janitorial services. I'm referring to the meals. I'm referring to everything that it takes to run an interim site. To me, that's services. Don't even get started on the enhanced services, which we're not getting in terms of the mental health and the drug addiction services, which is clearly we need to be getting from the county. But just the basic services of running an interim site.
So that's why on my end, in the report that you have from us on the scope of required services, the scope of work, we're trying to make sure that there's clarity and understanding, because there's a difference between operations and maintenance of the site, the staffing needed and required to operate the site from a basic level, which is what the city is funding, has been funding, and has always been funding. There is this concept of services that relates to clinical services, mental health support, a whole range of other services. And unfortunately, in the language, and everybody is very passionate, unfortunately, we're using the same word to mean lots of different things, and there's a lack of clarity that comes across. And so in our report, we're trying to make it clear that the scope of required services and the bed rate are talking about the maintenance and operation costs for the facilities, the staffing to provide support to the people who are staying in our interim sites. And that when we get to this conversation about helping people with the extra assistance they need with SUD or mental health or those other things, that comes in a different pathway, and we need to find that. So I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page.
We are, and oftentimes people are just talking about the enhanced services, and I appreciate it. I mean, when I read the California Welfare Institutions Code, it requires the county to relieve and support all these words: incompetent, poor, indigent persons, and those incapacitated by age, disease, or accident lawfully residing therein, when such persons are not supported and relieved by their relatives or friends or by other means, or by state hospitals and other state or private institutions. That to me means services for the indigent, meaning everything in the interim site. I know we have traditionally been paying, because nobody else is stepping up to do it, we have been paying, but my point in this is that we shouldn't even be paying any of that. I'm not suggesting that we pull our money. We have a moral obligation, and we are going to continue to do that, and we're going to find a way to get to the numbers we need to get to. But I felt like before even going there, I needed to put it out there, and I'm putting it out there a lot these days, especially with everything that's going on with the courts, because I really feel like the conversation has been framed the wrong way, where it's like we're doing the county a favor in some ways, and it's exactly the opposite. I mean, we are doing the county a favor when we do this stuff, and it's often presented the other way around, as if they're doing us a favor by picking up some portion of this, when the reality is they should be paying the entirety of this, and they should be paying it up to the level that needs to be there, because we also have requirements for that money to help the homeless as well, particularly on the building side. So I put that out there just as a baseline, and I know I may have gone a little off track on that.
I actually, if I could pick up on that just a little bit, in looking at the apt associate study that originally spurred this conversation, I think there is some conflation of mental health and substance abuse services with the operations and maintenance costs that service providers are experiencing. And I think I deeply empathize with service providers who are talking about having to fundraise for making payroll or taking out loans to make payroll, should not be the cost of doing business with the city. And I would be very curious, how many other services does the city provide for which contractors have to do that kind of thing? Is it just on homelessness that we operate like this, or is it across every single service that the city provides that contractors are forced into a situation where they're waiting months? I think there is a real discrepancy here between how we deal with homelessness and how we deal with every other piece of our service provision as a city that we do. But I do want to go back to the apt associate study, because I think there was overlap between operations and maintenance and services, mental health and health services. And those two were conflated in how people were providing their cost estimates in that study. So for example, in Exhibit 7 of the apt associates report, the services provided include case management, mental health services, physical health care, housing navigation, document assistance, benefits connections, life skills, budgeting and money management, and so on. And out of the 82 total providers that reported back to the study, almost all of them said that they do all of those things. And so my question to you, as we're looking at this cost structure and how we arrived at this number of $89, I understand that there's cost overages, but is it taking into account that they're providing all of these services? Or were those overages coming from the fact that they're providing additional services beyond operations and maintenance, which is what the city has signed up to fund at these sites?
Sure. Kelsey Madigan, Director of Interim Housing with LASA. There were a couple things that were included in the executive summary with APT, some of them which you noted, including housing navigation costs. So these were rental assistance costs, these are security deposit costs, mental health services costs that, yes, our providers are providing these services. However, they're not included in the bed rate calculation that we indicated here in the presentation. Those costs were taken out because those are not costs within the interim housing bed rate that we're paying out to providers.
So what was taken out of it?
Housing navigation costs, if there's any additional mental health clinician type of costs. The family interim housing beds were also included in that specific cost, which speaks to the high rate that was initially reported on the executive summary. So all of those things were separated out. The services that were discussed include our janitorial and maintenance services, the case management services, which include document readiness and UHA completion, and then the crisis management and services of the actual site. not additional clinical care, not additional housing navigation level services, and not the increase of the family rate that was included in the original apt executive summary.
Yeah, please. No, this was a clarification to your question.
Yeah, and there's just two of us, so we can do it easy back and forth. So do we have a number? What are we actually paying on a per bed basis for everything?
Are you referring to the proposed rates, or?
Well, right now we're paying $60 for basic, and then we're paying all these things that we took out, right? And so we're paying for those as well over with this hand, but we're only talking today about the bed rate and this. So just for all of our understanding, if you took all of the costs of an interim site and you put it on a per capita basis of what we are currently paying and what we should be paying, what are those numbers?
So it's going to vary because the two other categories, I would say, and the CAO would probably be better positioned to advise, but I don't know why I'm jumping ahead here. We talked about the property costs being separated, like the lease costs are being separated out of the bed rate, because there are some facilities that are on city property.
Take the lease cost completely out, because I get that.
Right. So the lease costs, those property costs are in a separate, and they're paid separately. With regard to clinical support, that level of services, that is county support. That is county supported. The county has been developing programs in that area to reach into interim housing, but those are in development now, and they're just starting. They're not in place.
They haven't provided those so far.
The answer is we're getting $0 for those things.
Because they're not being offered in interim.
Right.
They're not obligated to be offered in interim.
But 80 out of 82 providers surveyed for this report, many of whom were providing interim sites that are funded by the city, 80 of them said that they're providing mental health services, and it was included in the cost estimates for what they're paying. So that I'm just confused about if they're not being provided, then
So the apt associates, the cost study that they did was for county was for county sites.
It was for countywide.
Countywide, but there were multiple.
Right, and some of the go ahead.
Sorry, Nathaniel Vergao, Deputy Chief Program Officer at LASA. So the apt study was looking at costs across a wide range of interim housing providers that included providers that had contracts both with LASA, DMH, and DHS.
I know, but most of them said that they were 80 out of 82 respondents said that they were providing mental health services.
Yes.
Right? So how are they paying for it if the county's not giving any money? How are they paying for it? That's my question.
Many providers fundraise for those services. There are also a large number of those providers who have contracts with DHS and DMH, and they're leveraging the services across.
And some of them, I pay separately out of my discretionary account to have a San Fernando Valley mental health team stationed at Hope the Mission, which is not part of any of these numbers, but that's how some of these are getting, they're getting it either through something creative like that, which is still, by the way, the city paying for it. It's just a different pocket of the city. It's out of my office discretionary. But it's hard to, we want to factor those numbers to understand the true costs. Have those numbers popped in as well?
Yeah, so maybe this is a helpful point to explain part of what this exercise is about. This interim housing system that we're operating now exploded over the last 5 or 7 years as a result of the emergency that we're in. And this system is developed in an iterative process as an emergency to try and bring beds on immediately, starting with a bridge home, which the city stepped in to do, moving into everything that was in roadmap. All of this, especially during COVID, and in response to the freeway agreement that resulted from the court activities was done rapidly and iteratively, so that each scope of work, each determination on the bed rate, each determination of the total funding, each request for additional services or supportive services came independently with regard to a specific project. And the work that's being done now is to try and bring alignment to the entire system across the county beds, city beds, with the county, city, and LAHSA agreeing to a base scope of work that will be offered in interim housing, with the ability of any funder to come in and do the supplemental work that you're exactly describing, so that everybody knows this is the baseline, and that if we want to do enhanced services in a particular facility, we can come in and we can provide the additional funding to support exactly what you're saying, or if a service provider wants to provide that additional funding or from whatever other source or that additional service, they can do so. But the whole idea is that by creating this streamlined and consistent service, will create some efficiencies in the way we're administering and monitoring and managing the system that's difficult now, because we basically have a lot of bespoke contracts that we're dealing with.
Just one question here, because you said enhanced services, and there's an enhanced service rate, but that's still not going to include the mental health services. So maybe we need.
So the CAO maybe wants to, or LAHSA might talk about that. There's a basic staffing level that's in place that's that LAHSA can explain. We're actually, the bed rate that's being proposed includes an enhanced staffing level to further define and describe the supports that are provided to people who are living in the sites, and to further define the staffing requirements in the site to make sure that they're operated and maintained in a fair and appropriate level that we're describing. Maybe.
Yeah, and there are enhanced rates currently for the older adult population and specific women's programs. However, with the reprocurement, all of the same services should be provided to every single bed, not just specific enhanced beds, not just beds that are not deemed as enhanced. We believe the same level of services should be provided for all of those specific bed programs, so there will be no enhanced specific type of bed program within the city beds that are funded. And then I do also want to say that the county is not that they're not providing any services. They provide IHOP, which is expanding through the.
Sorry, they just started doing that.
Yeah,
it's like a couple months old. It's only in one spa. I mean,
yeah, no, I understand.
I'm
I
sorry,
just wanted
we
to
just
know.
can't be
sure.
We can't misrepresent what is happening at the sites. I think service providers are doing yeoman's work trying to get people what they need, but they've been patching it together. It's not actually being provided by people who are actually funded to provide it in some ways. You know, the county is provided to support mental health resources for people who are experiencing homelessness. We're not seeing that at our interim sites. And in that gap, I think our service providers are trying to patch it together.
Yeah, definitely. And I just wanted to change the no services. I understand that the services that are being provided are not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every time we talk about this, though, I will say that what we hear is, oh, we have a new program coming in that is addressing this, but we're talking about years of experience at this point. So. Sure.
And the city taxpayers are paying Measure H, you know, the majority of it, which is the services provided to the county. So it's painful. And the county does the IHOP with the HHIP money, right? They're not going into their general fund. They're not even using their Measure H. You know, and we're being asked to basically drain our general fund. And that's just, it's not right, because it deprives us from doing the work that we need to do to get people off the streets. And has the Board of Supervisors reviewed or approved the proposed rate increase that we're reviewing? Because ultimately they're the ones driving the rates.
Sheree is on her way up.
Good afternoon. I'm Sheree Todoroff, the Director of the Homeless Initiative with the County of Los Angeles. The Board of Supervisors and their staff have been briefed on the proposed rate increases and the recommendation that has come from the partners that worked on it. The board will take budgetary action for fiscal year 25-26, which is when they would approve funding for the rate increases. They do not need to take an action for the interim rate this fiscal year, and they do not vote on rates themselves.
So they don't vote on the rates?
Correct.
So who sets the rates?
The rates are set through agreement with the entities that we contract with and with the level of funding that we have.
But they have to approve those contracts.
The contracts are largely held by LAHSA, and so those contracts, they would be involved in approving the contract that the county has with LAHSA, and then LAHSA holds the contracts with the service providers.
So what if the city moved to 89? If we went from 69 to 89, what would the Board of Supervisors do, or what would the county do? I should say.
The county is also funding beds. We have about 6,000 beds that will be impacted by this rate, and we would be having the same conversation that the city is having about how we will fund that rate increase.
And could I ask whether those beds are are they DHS and DMH beds or separate beds?
The majority of them are actually through LAHSA, so it includes LAHSA funded beds and DHS Housing for Health beds as well.
I'm sorry, where are the beds?
The beds are throughout the county of Los Angeles. They're generally geographically distributed in some alignment with the homeless count. And so the proportion of the beds that are in the city of Los Angeles are relatively aligned with the proportion of people experiencing homelessness in the city of LA.
And these are mental health and drug addiction beds?
No, these are shelter beds just like what we're talking about here.
Okay. And we're not double counting?
We are not double counting, no.
Okay.
I had a question also about kind of the cost structure in the report, and I think it might be LAHSA that would have to speak to this. What percentage of our existing, actually not LAHSA, probably CAO, but anyway, I'll leave it to you guys. What percentage of our existing sites at the city are below 50 beds and above 50 beds? Like what percentage of our beds fall under those two categories?
I'll have to find that information and report back to you.
Do you have a order of magnitude or just a guess? I'm not going to hold you to it.
Apologies, it's on our one of our attachments. It's about 474 that are 50 beds or less. I'm sorry, 16 sites that are 50 beds or less, and about 50 sites that are 51 beds or more.
Okay.
Okay. And did we get a sense of what the full cost? I know I was trying to understand it, and I apologize. Part of this is really hard to get your head around all this stuff. It's confusing. But what is the full cost? You know, we're talking about the base cost, which is the 69, 89, that doesn't cover all these other things. But what is the full cost of a bed that does cover all those things? Understanding that the lease is different, so there's a range. But that's one of the few things that's different per site. Most of the other, if we were to have a full cost bed in the city of Los Angeles, let's say on city property, so you don't have to count the lease cost, what would it be?
Can I just ask for clarification what you mean by a full service bed?
A full service bed that includes housing navigation, that includes all of the enhanced services, many of which are being provided now by the service provider, but we're not paying for. So what would be the full cost of a bed if we were to do it the right way and have the right number of housing navigators, all of the cost, everything that's above the base cost, because we said all these other things are not part of the base cost, right? With the 69 or 89, whatever it is covering basically putting somebody in a room and making sure that the area is clean, but it's not covering
Well, it also covers case management,
case management
so
for
it'll
sure.
get them document ready and food, but it will not get to. Yeah, sure, you can stay. I think you probably have a couple.
Yeah,
I think you might be able to shed some light on this.
And maybe the county, because the county may have beds like this because they have the whole range of service, so maybe they know the answer. I don't know, but I mean, what would be that number?
We would have to understand what is in the list of is included in that sense of what is a full service bed or what is a full service facility, list out what level of clinical supports you need. There is a separate degree of funding for housing navigation in the system, so we do need to address that in a separate report to you, so we can be clear on that. But part of the question is, to what degree do you need that full suite of services for everybody who's in a particular residence? Because you may not need, right now we have in our proposed scope of required services a case manager ratio of 25:1. So the idea is that in that case, in the base rate, in the base level, case managers, there will be one case manager for every 25 occupant.
Is case manager in the base cost?
That is in the base cost. And the case... Yeah, beginning July 1st, 2025. And the case manager is obligated to meet with the clients at a minimum once a week, help facilitate them in connections to the county services, help facilitate them with their transportation needs, help facilitate the development of their housing plan, and prepare them, help them develop their document readiness, and help prepare them to connect to housing navigation to move on to to create that stable level. But so there is in the new scope of required services going forward, a clear, which doesn't exist now, a clear statement of what the base level case management will be. If you're looking for supplement to that, to enhance that with additional services related to their clinical needs, we would need to identify what those are and figure out how to deliver that in the site. Right. And so if that was an instruction you had for us, staff could certainly
that would be great. But even to know what that would mean, what the actual dollar value would be if you had some of the basic enhanced services and I should just say the 25:1. That seems kind of ridiculous. In terms of, you take one person to DMV for the day, to get their paper, and that eats up half the day. I don't see how we can be getting people through our interim sites at a 25:1 ratio, but that's maybe a different conversation.
I wanted to offer to you that Hope the Mission provided a budget that would provide full cost recovery for their services, which may offer some insight into what the service provider is facing for that. But I don't think that includes things that county service providers are providing, like intensive health care or what a DHS clinician would be providing when they come and visit an in-room site. I think this is, so I think this gets us one step towards it. I had one other question, which is, as we're considering this rate increase, we're doing kind of a strange thing, which is, I think we are clarifying what are the services that we're getting, right? And I think there's been a lot of talk on this committee and across the council that suggests that what we expect at interim housing sites is actually much more than what they're staffed for, much more than what they're paid for, right? And so what we're doing right now, I think, is going to be a challenging moment for Los Angeles in many ways, because we're going to be increasing our bed payment significantly in some cases, because some of our Bridge Home sites are very, very low rates, daily rates. We're going to be significantly increasing our payments, but we're actually going to be getting zero of those additional services that many, I think, members thought were already included at our interim sites based on their understanding of the word services, like mental health services and others. Those services are needed. What is this group's recommendation for how we actually get those services? And how do we ensure that we're getting those services? How do we have, visibility into what services are being provided and, how many people are actually availing themselves of those services? Or that they're being offered regularly.
Right. To the best of my knowledge, this is the first time council has actually had this conversation in all of this time. As I said earlier, this has been a bespoke process that we've developed. We've relied on our partners at LAHSA and the county to develop the program. This council has expressed great interest in understanding all of these details and being involved in these details. And that has allowed us to bring forward the reports and the information that you have in front of you today. So in one sense, this is the start of a conversation. This is the council's opportunity to provide additional direction for staff in which way we need to go. So what has been brought forward to you in the bed rate and the scope of required services is a base rate. If the council would like to go further or in a different direction or build that out in some way, staff will take those instructions and do that additional analysis. And as we understand that there's absolutely and certainly a cost associated with that, and we understand the consequences of those additional costs. And I think Mr. Zabel has additional thoughts on
Welcome,
this.
Mr. Zabel.
Sure. One area you can look, or one site that you could look at, is the Mayfair, because that is a site that we provide the basic bed rate services the city pays for, and then there is a grant that pays for enhanced services that include a number of clinical services and health services, mental health services that the county is providing through a grant that we got from the state, that we received from the state, or that the county applied for and received from the state. That all-in rate is $157 per bed per night. It's $111 for the basic operations and services, and $46 for the enhanced county provided services.
And I don't recall all of the components of that. We would just want to check to make sure, is housing navigation part of that or not, and add, just to confirm the full inventory of services. I think that the council members that we should take a look at that.
So why don't we bring that back to our next meeting, that we'll have a clarification on what the Mayfair exactly is offering in terms of basic and enhanced services and what rates those are covering. Going back to what Mr. Blumenfield was asking earlier about kind of the responsibility of the county in providing some of these services, my question is, even in the case of the Mayfair, we had to secure grant funding in order for us to be able to get those funds at that site. And I so appreciate all of these new beds. Like, we will not be able to reduce street homelessness without new beds. It's just basic fact, right? We're just not going to. It does make me uncomfortable, though, that we have like Cadillac beds and Toyota Tercel beds in our system. And on an understanding that, many of the people who are in our sites are eligible for county services. They're Medi-Cal eligible. They're, they're very much county clients, ideal county clients. Do we have to then go through a process of securing grant funding for each of our sites in order to make sure that county services are provided in them? I mean, it feels challenging, to say the least, to be able to do that, knowing that $89 is going to be beyond the scope of our budget. But people deserve those services. People deserve that care. That's the values under which we operate here.
This is a very important conversation to be happening. Our system has historically operated with a range of interim housing beds or shelter beds. So I'm talking about unlicensed beds. And that they have had some different levels of service associated with them. And I think, originally their approach there was to be able to have the range of beds that meets the different needs of clients, right? And to be able to, and not every client needed the Cadillac bed. And part of by having different ranges of beds and trying to meet the needs of individual clients, we're also able to have the maximum number of beds in order to be able to tier the beds to meet the client's needs. But I think like we are all in agreement that clients are very complex. There are a range of needs, and not all of the sites have the level of service to meet all of the levels of needs of the clients in those beds. I think it is important to understand here when we're talking about the Mayfair, there are not county clinical staff. When we talk about the enhanced services there, those dollars are actually going to the homeless service provider that's operating the site, and they are using their staff to provide those services. These are not Medicaid services. These are not billable services. These are, and the clients may or may not actually meet medical necessity criteria for Medicaid services. I'm sure a number of them do, but what we're talking about here is the range of bed types and the staffing ratios, essentially, that vary across bed types. And so the county, with those beds that I've been talking about, we've been funding both basic bed types that are largely administered through LAHSA, and then we're also funding some bed types that but using the term here like enhanced services, those bed types are, the contracts are with the homeless services providers. They are providing all of the services with their staff. There's not a separate group of county clinicians when we're talking about that bed rate that are coming in. So that's sort of like a decision on how one wants to allocate their funds to purchase what type of beds. Separate from that, the county clinical services need to be connected to all of the sites and for all of the clients who need them. So that's separate. I want to distinguish between having a more robust staffing pattern that we're paying more for. That's not about a billable clinical service. And the county is funding those range of bed types versus the additional clinical medical necessity services.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
I mean, county may be funding those somewhere, but they're not funding them in the city. They're not funding the ones that we're building. And they're not funding not only the city of LA, but this is a problem across the county because I've talked to council members in other small cities who, and I've given them a hard time. Why aren't you building beds in your area? And part of what they say is we don't have an incentive. We're disincentivized from doing it because we know, and this is what the small cities say, that if we build it, the county's not going to pay us for the services. And so we have no incentive for doing it. And they basically say, we're just going to send them to you because you guys are the suckers that are, that are going to keep doing it. So it is a big problem in that respect, and that if the county's only looking at paying the beds that they're making and they're not doing the ones that the cities are doing, then they're disincentivizing us from doing what we should be doing.
I would respectfully disagree with what you just said. So the county and the city have for a long time funded beds. The county is funding beds throughout the entire county, including thousands of beds in the city of Los Angeles. And city of Los Angeles residents are using those beds. The city is funding beds in the city of LA. They have been complementing each other. They have been working alongside each other. Most of them are administered by the same entity, LAHSA. So also the county has intentionally set aside funding for cities to be able to pay for beds for cities. And we have a program in which we do that.
So I'm just telling you what I'm hearing from other council members in other areas, and I get it, because while that may be the case that there's money set aside for that, it's not enough. It's not reaching. It's why we're arguing over these, MOUs and the 60 and the roadmap and all this other stuff when we shouldn't be even discussing that. That should be the county's paying that, and we put our money toward the building of more beds, and then we get everything moving forward. And I wanted to ask a question about Measure A, the dollars. If we do raise the rate, Does that mean that we will get and the increase goes into effect? Does that mean we'll get less money, less Measure A dollars?
Are you talking? So you're talking about Measure A, the initiative that's on the ballot for November?
Yes.
Okay. And
if we raise the rate now, how will that impact the money that we get as a city from the county?
Measure A has a component, and I want to be clear, I am only able to speak factually to Measure A, that it has a component that is for local solutions funds for cities. So there's a component of it that would result in direct allocations to cities. The cities would, within whatever the allowable uses are, would be the ones to allocate those funds and determine what rates they were using for those funds.
Right. So it's an absolute dollar value. So if we had, obviously, it won't go. The dollars won't go as far with a higher rate, which we all understand that's true across the board for everything. But that's the reality is we need to pay folks, but we have to have our eyes wide open in that we pay folks more, we have less money overall to do what we need to do, which means less services.
That is absolutely correct. And I think, well, I realize we were having a conversation here about beds that are funded by the city. I'm hoping that we can get to a place where we can have a full understanding of all of the beds that are in the city of Los Angeles that may be funded with different funding streams and be thinking about them like a system, and how to maximize all of those beds and how to have a system that's able to get clients into the bed that's going to best meet their needs.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely the conversation that this committee has been having over the last few months. We've been pushing and have finally secured, I think, the first pieces of data that will help us to understand what is the system that we're engaging with. We got our first pieces of insight into what interim housing sites are doing after, quite a long time. And I think part of what, I've been engaging with the county on, and others have been engaging with the county on, both through through kind of one-on-one engagement at interim sites that we manage in our districts and through policy conversations that are happening in this committee and beyond, is really to try and say, if we are building a system, then the city does need to have visibility into that system. And we really don't have that right now at all. And because of that lack of visibility, we can't make the case for that system. So, I've actually been through the Executive Committee on Regional Homelessness Alignment, have been going to regional COGs and other places to talk about exactly this issue. And locally, all of the other smaller cities say the exact same thing that the city of LA does, And I think it has to do with the fact that county services that are being provided through Measure H and that will be provided through Measure A if it does pass, there is a lack of understanding. Like, the Local Solutions Fund is not the only money that the smaller cities are getting. They're also getting a percentage of those services that the county is providing through its departments, but they have no real visibility into that. We, for example, don't know how to refer people into that and see that we're making those referrals successfully. We have no capacity to ask for and see that services are coming to our interim housing sites. Like, I think I want nothing more than to create that system. And it's because I have personally witnessed people on the street having mental health crises and calling for emergency mental health support from the county and being told we won't come for 2 days, or phones not being answered. And it's just really, it's heartbreaking, it's frustrating. And I want to fix that. I know that the city can do more on providing beds. That's why I'm doing this work. Let's build as many beds as possible, fund them appropriately, make sure that people are able to do their jobs. Like, I take this very seriously, and I take the call to create a system very seriously. And I hope that the county will, I see the county as a partner to this. I see ECRA as a really positive place where we can make that partnership happen. And I have hope that we can continue to engage and really engage productively on this issue. Because I think I stand ready and willing to do that, and really have been, waiting for more robust information so that we can actually start building that system together. Okay, so I want to just say it's 5:30, and because of our lack of quorum, I think we are obviously not able to move this forward to the full council, but we've gotten a number of pieces of information here in this committee. I think there's additional questions that we're asking about in terms of next steps. There's different additional questions that we've asked in terms of the breakdown of what is being provided and what needs to be provided. And what I would recommend is also, and I know that the CAO will not have this information available now, but we should have more information shortly about how many more beds we're going to be asked to provide as a city through the settlement agreement, the Alliance settlement agreement. And that may be subject to change as well based on issues being discussed at the court. Maybe it won't, but I think it could also. I assume that the assumptions that you've put together here, are these just for our existing beds, or do they also include the new obligations that we've taken on under our existing bed plan?
It's for existing beds as
So,
of today.
Okay, so if we are adding 300, not 2,500, but I'm not sure what the delta will be.
Yeah, just to be clear on that question, and when we come back, when there is a full committee, we can report in more detail on that. But I do want to just be clear. The question was asked about, do we have enough funding to move to even 89 in January? The answer is no. We would run a small deficit. But given our obligations, with our current complement of beds, without considering the additional beds that we need to add, we would be running we would have a significant gap next year in 24-25 at the 89/116 level. We do not have the funding to cover that, and we will need to make some tough decisions in order to cover that.
And what if there was to be another HAP round at the state level? Would that impact our ability to cover the bed costs next year, the increased bed rate costs?
We would. We are counting the forthcoming HAP. Again, the problem
through 26.
Through 26, 27.
Okay.
The challenge, of course, with HAP is that it's a one-time grant, and we are using it for operational costs, and that presents a challenge. And so if HAP, we can't assume that will be continued. If it were to be continued, that would certainly help things. But in terms of covering the higher rates at and keeping all of the beds that we have open today, open for the next 3 years, we would fall significantly short.
Even in our existing bed plan.
Our existing beds, period. Okay. Our bed plan is over and above that.
Got it.
The bed plan is another 700, right?
Our bed plan. We have 4,252 beds that we need to put out there over the next 3 years.
Currently, without even an agreement.
Over what we have currently. Correct. Over what we have currently, which is why we have. No, this is what you're looking at. What is in the report represents the fiscal impact of the rate increase on what we are currently paying for, and that is why we've had the conversation and why we will need to. When I say tough decisions, we're having a conversation with the court, which is public, and our goal is to secure an agreement with the court that will put us in a position or prevent us from being in a position of having to demobilize beds as a result of our requirement to add more beds, combined with the increased rates.
Right. And I want to just take one step back from the broader conversation around our current bed count and talk about performance at our beds. Thanks to the new data that we have available, I think we've seen some fairly troubling outcomes across our interim sites that, again, we as a council had no real visibility into in advance of having this data available, both on a system-wide level and on a site-by-site level, including an average stay in interim sites that's close to a year, and significant exits back to homelessness. And even with the number of people that we have, currently housed at our sites, only half actually being document ready. Right. So I think we have somewhat of a disjuncture here because on the one hand, I think Councilmember Blumenfield and I are very close to our service provider partners. We visit our interim sites. We know how hard they work. And yet we also see that at the sites, there are some real challenges in terms of, maybe because of the staffing challenges that y'all are facing and other issues that we're not actually delivering on some of the outcomes that we need to deliver on at those sites, and that people are staying in them for quite a long time. And so I guess part of my question around this is, I know the SRS changes the way in which we look at that information. Do you anticipate improvements in those outcomes through these increases? And if you anticipate that change, how will we make sure that those improvements are visible to us and that, we're able to say to the service providers that are doing well, let's make sure we're working with you more, and then that we can help the service providers who are not doing as well with additional resources, training, whatever it is that they may need.
Yeah. The scope of required services has a number of revisions in it that do exactly that ensure the case managers are working with the occupants on a more regular basis, that are focused on those connections to the supports that will help them move into permanent housing, stabilize them more quickly. So, and Kelsey and Nathaniel could talk a little bit more about that in detail. On our side, the CLA report recommends that we initiate a review process of that data. Those dashboards are now a really significant tool. And if the city would sit down, and we recommend the city sit down with LAHSA and service providers to go over that data, evaluate that data, and identify where there are blockades in the system that are slowing down the ability to serve. We don't have that in place right now. We recommend building those kinds of evaluation tools so that we do exactly that work.
Right. Well, we have that at an ad hoc level, but we don't have it at a system-wide level. And going back to this idea of building a system, I think I was kind of shocked when, after some months of being in this role, that we don't have an evaluation system or a performance management system or even a performance review system anywhere in the city right now. Exactly. Even though we're putting all of our dollars into it, we did not build that into our existing system. That is a function that is entirely sitting with LAHSA. And these are our dollars. And so for me, it's imperative that we have the capacity to be able to review that. And we're working towards using the new data and our Homeless Strategy Committee to actually do that regularly going forward. But we have not been doing that so far. Councilmember Blumenfield.
And I appreciate what you're saying, Mr. Wickham, but I don't see how we're raising the rates to do the same thing that we're doing. We're just categorizing it, but we're not getting any more services. So I don't see how, in answer to your question was, if we raise these rates, are we going to start seeing better outcomes? I don't see what's going to unless I feel like the county steps up and actually provides the services, and I know that there's talk of it in certain areas, but I don't see this changing. The rates go up just to keep up with inflation for the folks who are working there, but it doesn't. And just because we're outlining the requirements, those requirements, they're already doing those things. They're just subsidizing them.
For example,
so I don't know
currently,
how this is going to make it any better.
Well,
currently the scope of required services require that service providers contact a client a minimum once a month. That's the base.
New requirements are great,
and the new requirement is to be in contact with a client at a minimum of once a week, right? So those are the kinds of efforts where we're able to now measure and monitor the performance, and we're setting the standard in a way so that if we're not seeing that work, we can ask more questions and follow up on that.
Right.
If it's just once a month, right? So that's why I'm a little more hopeful than the.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the optimism. And I'm usually an optimist. I try not to be pessimistic. All I'm saying is those accountability measures will make a difference, and better management will make a difference. Better coordination will make a difference. But the actual rate increase isn't going to do a hill of beans other than provide critical dollars so that people can get paid a living wage.
Well, the argument that I've heard, and one of the things that I think has been a constant issue at our sites has been vacancy rates. That sites are actually not staffed to do the work that they're doing, or unevenly staffed. There's certain agencies that are able to staff well and to keep staff, and there's many others that are not. And so I think there's really big discrepancies. And so I think the question I was asking was really trying to get at, is it going to address some of the issues related to performance that we've come up against over and over?
So if I may, the interim adjustment is looking to shore up the shelters the way they stand today, to in part be able to address the staffing issues, but in acknowledgement that they do not get us to where you want us to be in terms of even a base level. What we've put together in terms of the SRS is the goal is to both ensure that there are appropriate staffing ratios. Prior staffing ratios were not specified, the 1 to 25 for a case manager as well as 1 to 25 for support staff. We've increased that, which should increase the staffing at the sites, which is a contributing factor to the increase from 69 to 89 for next fiscal year. In addition, as Mr. Wickham pointed out, we are including additional accountability measures in the SRS, and more importantly, LASA is standing up through our grants management department an active contract management process that will allow us to have greater visibility on a regular basis and greater communication with providers on a daily basis or on a regular basis. Additionally, the work that we've been working on in our programs teams, we've identified some funding through our HAP that we've reallocated to be able to stand up additional staff within our interim housing team to be able to do better, more robust TA and oversight with the providers to support the rollout of this new program. And we've had to take the HAP dollars because, as our CFO pointed out earlier, overall our admin rate from the city is 2.5%, which does not allow us to have significant staffing to be able to do the oversight and TA that we would like to be able to do.
And as we've discussed a couple times, we're talking about having dedicated case managers now, rather than having staff who are doing janitorial services and doing the case management and doing, all of the other things that are being asked of the service providers to do in a site, to just keep it at a basic operational open level, right? So this increased staffing level is allowing for better focused support to the clients who are residing there, as well as other staff that are going to take care of the operations and maintenance so that case managers can work with the clients. That's how we're trying to get to this better improvement.
And great. And Ms. Todoroff, I hope that go ahead. Why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. I just feel like I need to say something that is, part of the really difficult thing to say. And I want to acknowledge everything that you're saying about the clinical services. I agree with you. There's not a dispute there. And I do think that rate adjustments that allow providers to be able to recruit and retain staff will have a difference on how the sites operate. And you will see some changes in some of those metrics that you're looking at, like the number of clients who are document ready, for example, that will change. But we also, in the best staffed sites with the highest rates, the issue that they're all dealing with across the whole spectrum, and I refer to the best site with the highest staff, whatever rates, because just to say that all of our providers are working very hard to move people, have them exit the homeless response system and move into permanent housing. The thing that the lengths of, we will make incremental differences in lengths of stay. We'll maybe see big difference in people who are document ready. We're not going to see big differences in people exiting our system and big differences in people getting housed until we have a big change in the number of units that we have to move people into and to be able to move into permanent housing. I know you know the data, we are 500,000 units short of the affordable housing units we need in this county to serve our population. We have thousands of clients every single day. They have a rental subsidy, they have a case manager, they have a housing navigator, they have somebody helping them find housing, and they can't secure it because of our housing market. We will be able to make incremental changes in the way our interim housing providers operate. And I think there will be differences in their recruitment and retention and maybe more stability over time. The face of this does not change until we have housing to move people into.
Yeah, and it's linked, because when we're paying for the supportive services that we feel like the county should be paying for, that's money that comes out of our subsidies for building housing and doing those other things. So they're all inextricably linked.
Yeah, and I think these conversations are important, and we need to have full transparency. But the county is also funding beds. They are funding thousands of beds in this city. We're doing the same thing that you're doing with the same goal. We're doing the same thing with the same goal. There's not a us versus you bed. We're doing the same thing with the same goal. It's the same dollars. We give you more dollars, we cut our beds. It's the same. It's that there's money. There's a certain amount of money. That's what we're having. We're trying to do the best that we can with it.
Right. And I have a slightly different, I think, window into this than some of my colleagues on this council. I see, I do see what the county is doing. I've visited sites. I know that the county is doing a lot. I think one way in which we can build that trust between the city and the county, which I think is there's a lot more trust now than there has been in the past. And I'm really grateful for it. I'm really grateful for ECRA. I think there's a real spirit of collaboration, which I have not seen before in a formal mechanism. People say it, but that's actually doing it, and that's different. It's really different. And I think if we can show it as well, if we can demonstrate it through information, if we can follow people who are in our encampments, so that means every step of the way, watching people move off of the streets and seeing where they are met with city services and where they're met with county services and where they end up ultimately. We don't have visibility into that system right now in the way that we need to. And we've put so much money into it. And we just have to build that out. We have to build that visibility into it. We have, I think, an opportunity ahead of us to do that now, not just because we want to hold every dollar accountable. We want to make sure it's going towards housing as many people as possible, but because we care about people who are on our streets. And that means every step from where are the encampments, how often are they getting visited by outreach workers, whether they're funded by the county MDTs or whether they're funded by city outreach HET teams. How often are they visiting an encampment in my district? That is information that we should have available to us. What services are they being offered? Where are they being referred to? Where are they moving into? Once they're in the interim sites and they need mental health services, how do you make that referral, and how do you make sure that referral is responded to? If the person is refusing it, that's one thing. But, I think there's a lot of people who with repeated visits would take those services. That's how we've had success with our sickest people on the streets, is that we have outreach teams that we contract from our office and we ask them to go out every single day. But we can't ask that of our county partners for our sickest people. And that, I think, can be a challenge for us as we're trying to help these individuals. And so finally, when they move into a permanent supportive housing site, where are those sites? How are they referred there? How do I know that the people I care about, that I want to get help, are actually getting into those sites? I want that information. And I think all of us deserve that information for the good of this city and for the good of the individuals that are living in it. So I look forward to working with you to get that. And I thank you for being here. You don't have to be here. And I'm grateful for your presence. You know, I think we have a lot more work to do together. If we could, I think it's so late. I want to thank you all for your patience. I know this is a really big issue. I want to thank everyone in the audience who stuck around for as long as you did. Even if we had had quorum, we would not have been able to make a decision on this item today. There are a number of unanswered questions that we need to get answers on. And so I don't want you to feel like we're not moving at the pace that we could have had we had a better system today. And we will certainly make sure that all of the other committee members are aware of what happened in this, the questions that were asked, and that if they have additional questions, that we're asking them to all of our partners here in advance of our next meeting so that we can take action next time we're together. But I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank everyone here for coming. We have a number of other items that I think we'll have to continue to our next meeting. Is there anything else that I need to do?
Yeah, Madam Chair, would you like to keep items 2 through 6 in committee?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's hold it on the desk.
All right, per the chair, we'll stay in committee.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you all. This meeting is adjourned-ish.
This non-meeting is adjourned.
Non-meeting is. Thank you all.